Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from, also what time is it. There was something wrong with the walls of Birchfield House. You wouldn't notice it at first. In fact, most people didn't. But if you stood in the hallway near the grandfather clock at midnight, just before the chime struck, you'd hear it. A low sound, a breath, a murmur that vibrated deep in your bones, like the voice of something that shouldn't speak. The house had stood for over 100 years on the edge of a forest that the locals refused to name. Not because it lacked one, but because calling it by its name was believed to draw its attention. A superstition, people used to say with a nervous smile, until people began to disappear. Not all at once, one by one, quietly, without a trace. No one in Birchfield remembered the original builders. The town's records had a neat gap from 1892 to 1905, as though someone had ripped the pages clean from the ledger. All anyone knew was that the house had always been there, its gray shingles curling like old bark, its windows always just slightly too dark. It was Ava Monroe who bought the house last. A writer, the townspeople had whispered. Divorced, quiet, kept to herself. Moved in with her daughter Mia, a 10-year-old with a bright mind and a strange habit of talking to corners when she thought no one was watching. They arrived in the dead of winter when the fog crept low over the roads like smoke looking for a fire. The townsfolk watched from behind frost-covered windows as the moving van pulled away and the front door of Birchfield House shut for the first time in years. And then the lights in the attic came on. That first night, Ava didn't sleep. It wasn't the usual moving jitters or the creaking of an old house settling. It was something else. A rhythm, tapping, a slow, deliberate beat echoing through the pipes that didn't quite follow the pattern of wind or age. It moved. From the walls near the kitchen to the stairs, then into her room. She told herself it was the heating. Old systems had quirks. But the house was silent during the day. Too silent. Ava had been through enough not to spook easily. Divorce had that effect. You learn to live with tension coiled in your chest. Learn to mask fear with reason. But on the third night, as she sat at her desk trying to write, she noticed the hallway behind her in the mirror above her desk. There was a figure. Small. Still, it stood just at the edge of the light, motionless. When she spun around, there was nothing there. The hallway was empty. The silence pressed in around her like a held breath. She looked back at the mirror. Nothing now. Just herself, pale and tired. In the morning, she asked Mia if she'd been out of bed during the night. No, Mommy, she said. But I heard the knocking again. They're getting louder. Who? Maya blinked. The ones in the walls. Ava froze. What do you mean? Maya just shrugged and returned to her cereal. Later that day, Ava walked the perimeter of the house. The paint was flaking off in long strips. The window to the attic had a crack down the center like a split pupil. She climbed up to the attic with a flashlight. Dust blanketed everything. Boxes, an old mirror with a cloth draped over it, and in the far corner, a rocking horse. One of those antique ones, chipped white paint, eyes wide open. It was turned toward the wall. When she walked past it, the beam of her flashlight caught something carved into the wood panel behind it. A name. Cor, and below it H-U-H. That night the knocking returned, louder. And this time it came with whispers. They didn't say words exactly. They hissed, sick, wet syllables that slid across the floorboards. Ava lay frozen in bed, eyes wide, watching the crack under her bedroom door. The hall light flickered, and then Mia screamed. Ava was up in an instant, heart racing, running to her daughter's room. Mia was curled on the bed, pointing to the corner. There was a woman, she said between sobs. She didn't have eyes. She asked me if I wanted to see what she saw. Ava checked the room. There was no one. Of course there wasn't. But the air was wrong, too cold. And it smelled like wet earth, like something pulled from 6 feet under. The next morning, Ava called the sheriff, a kindly older man with a mustache and wary eyes. She didn't tell him about the woman in the room, or the whispers, or the knocking. She just asked if anything strange had happened in Birchfield House. He looked at her for a long time. "Bad memories," he finally said. "That house has got them sunk deep. Anything ever happened to a girl named Cora?" His hand tightened on the steering wheel. "You don't want to go looking where there's no one left to answer. Some places want to stay asleep." Before he left, he paused. "Just don't dig. Let it lie." But Ava had already started digging. She went to the Birchfield Library. It smelled of paper and mildew. The librarian was a thin woman with yellowed eyes who barely looked up as Ava scoured the newspaper archives. Most editions were intact, except for the stretch between 1892 and 1905. The missing years. She found one article, though, wedged between pages of unrelated deaths. Laukagirani vexlai 10 die sir party of taram arham undiar was tarau esir kashkan cis tichi fetuar ara ame shuas tekidi yt hahusi. Iras faun avadan ce. The house, not someone. The house. Ava stared at the yellowed photograph. Cora's face was faded, but the outline was clear. The same age as Mia. A sadness in her eyes. Or was it warning? She went back to the attic. This time she brought tools. She pried the wood paneling off the wall where the name had been carved. Behind it was empty space. No insulation, no bricks. Just a narrow tunnel, angled downward. The smell that hit her was like rot wrapped in mold. Against all reason, she crawled in. It didn't go far. Just enough for someone small to hide. At the end, a crude wooden box sat wedged in the corner. Inside a child's dress, a porcelain doll with gouged out eyes, and a bundle of letters. She took the letters back downstairs and began to read. They were written in shaky hand. The same one over and over again. "I saw her again last night. She sits on the ceiling and sings to me. She says she's hungry. Father won't listen. He says it's my imagination, but she showed me her real face. It's all teeth. She asked me to join her. She said the walls are hollow for a reason. I think tomorrow I'll say yes." The last letter was dated the night Cora vanished. That night, Mia didn't speak at dinner. She stared at the window. "Do you see her too?" she finally whispered. Ava tried to stay calm. "Who?" "The one with the long neck. She says you opened the wrong door." Before Ava could speak, the lights flickered and went out. The knocking began immediately. Faster now. Urgent. From inside the walls. Then came the laughter, high, pitched, and cruel. It echoed from the vents, from the attic, from beneath the floorboards. And finally the voice. Cora said yes. What will Maya say? Ava ran to her daughter, pulling her into the living room, clutching the box of letters. "What does she want?" she asked. Maya didn't answer, because her eyes had turned black, not blank, not dead, moving. Tiny, swirling shadows in the shape of fingers and mouths. Ava screamed, but the house only whispered back. Cora opened the hollow, and now it's hungry again. The blackness in Maya's eyes didn't fade when the lights came back on. Ava had expected it to be some kind of trick of the darkness, a leftover panic painted over her daughter's face. But no. Even in the warm yellow glow of the chandelier flickering overhead, those shadows remained. They wreathed behind Mia's gaze like something trapped in a jar of tar. Ava backed away slowly, the letters still clutched in her hand. Her heart thudded so loud it drowned out everything else. She didn't know what to do. Hug her daughter or run. "Mia," she whispered, as if speaking louder might break whatever thread of sanity was still holding the moment together. "Can you hear me?" Mia blinked slowly. Her lips parted. And the voice that came out was not hers. It was lower, older, like wind pressed through rotted wood. She said you'd come looking. Maya's head tilted slightly, too far to one side. They always do. Ava's breath caught in her throat. She took a cautious step forward. But Mia flinched and let out a sharp hiss, like steam escaping a kettle. Then, just as suddenly, her daughter collapsed onto the floor in a heap, unconscious. The shadows in her eyes vanished. Ava rushed to her side, checked her pulse. It was fast but steady. She carried Mia to the couch, her hands shaking, her mind screaming to make sense of what just happened. Something was inside the house. Something that could get inside her daughter. It was watching, listening, and worse, it knew her name. That night Ava didn't sleep. She sat in the corner of the living room with a fireplace poker in one hand and the bundle of Cora's letters in the other. She read each one again under the pale orange glow of a flickering candle. There were 14 in total, each more desperate than the last, each painting a picture of a little girl haunted by something only she could see. Ava kept stopping at one line, rereading it, turning it over in her mind until it lost all meaning. The walls are hollow for a reason. Why would a house need hollow walls? By morning, Maya hadn't woken up. She was breathing still, but her skin was colder than it should have been. Iva wrapped her in blankets, called the town's doctor, and tried to sound rational on the phone. No mention of voices or shadows or letters. Just a fever, a collapse, maybe a seizure. When Dr. Corwin arrived, Iva instantly regretted calling him. He was polite, even friendly. But the moment he stepped into the house, something in his expression shifted. He didn't look at Mia first, he looked at the walls. His fingers traced along the baseboards, slow and careful, as if remembering a tune he hadn't heard in years. "How long have you lived here?" he asked without looking up. 4 days. He nodded slowly. "And when did the dreams start?" Ava hesitated. "What dreams?" Dr. Corwin stood. His face was pale. "You'll have them soon enough." He checked Mia, asked a few perfunctory questions, but he didn't seem truly interested in her condition. It was the house. He was watching it, listening like it might speak at any moment. Before he left, he paused at the front door and said quietly, "There are things older than this town. Things that sleep under places like this. If she starts speaking in numbers, don't let her finish." Ava didn't ask what he meant, because deep down, she knew. That night the dreams came. She was standing in the attic. The rocking horse was moving by itself, slow and rhythmic, creaking with each sway. A child was humming. The same tune Ava had heard before, but only in her mind. She turned, and there was Cora. Except her eyes were sewn shut with black thread, her mouth smiling too wide, blood pooling in the corners. "I said yes," Cora whispered. "You will too." Ava woke up gasping, clutching the letters to her chest. There were new words written on the back of the last page, in smudged pencil. They hadn't been there before. "She lives behind the mirror. She watches from the hollow." The mirror, the one in the attic. Ava crept upstairs, every stair groaning beneath her weight. The attic door stuck at first, as if something heavy leaned against it from the other side. When it finally gave way, a gust of foul air poured out, thick and warm like breath. She moved to the mirror. The cloth was still draped over it. Her hands trembled as she reached up and pulled it away. The mirror didn't show her reflection. It showed the hallway. The one downstairs. The hallway where she'd seen the figure in the mirror the first night. Then the view shifted, though Ava didn't move. The hallway faded, and now it showed the basement, a place she hadn't been yet. She didn't want to go, but she knew she had to. She found the basement door behind the pantry shelves. It was a narrow wood door, warped from moisture, with a rusted latch that resisted her every effort. When it finally opened, the stench hit her like a blow. Mold, rot, earth that had never seen the sun. She descended slowly, each step deeper than the last, like the staircase was stretching, spiraling far beyond what physics should allow. At the bottom, the air was heavy, and the walls, they pulsed, swollen with something inside them, like lungs breathing. She reached the dirt floor. There were marks, drag lines, as if someone had been pulled, and then she saw the symbols carved into the beams. Circles within circles, jagged lines, shapes that made her stomach turn just to look at. At the center of the floor was a trapdoor, It wasn't part of the house's plans. She was sure. It was newer, or maybe older. She couldn't tell. It throbbed slightly, like it was alive. She turned to leave. But the whisper came again, louder this time. "Open it." She froze. "No," she said. "I'm not listening to you." The whisper became a scream. "Open it." The trapdoor flung open on its own. Inside was a tunnel of wood and flesh, lined with eyes. Dozens of them. Human, animal, unrecognizable. Watching, blinking. She slammed it shut and bolted upstairs, heart pounding, lungs burning. When she got back to the living room, Mia was sitting up and smiling. "Did you find her?" Mia asked. Her voice was her own, but just beneath it, Ava heard the other one. "The old one. She's awake now, and she knows your name." Ava grabbed her daughter by the shoulders. "We're leaving. Right now." Maya didn't blink. "You can't leave. Watch me." They packed within 10 minutes, Ava's hands moving on pure instinct. She threw clothes, keys, her laptop into the back seat, carried Mia out in her arms. The house moaned as they left. It sounded almost like it was calling her back. But they didn't look back, not until they reached the highway. Only then did Ava check the rearview mirror, and there, in the back seat, was Cora, smiling, stitching a thread through her own lips. And in the distance, Birchfield House stood tall, waiting, watching, because it knew no one ever really leaves. Not for long, and now it had Mia's scent. Ava didn't stop the car for 3 hours. The sky had darkened by then, not from sunset, but from the heavy, bloated clouds that clung to the horizon like a warning. Every time she glanced in the rearview mirror, her fingers trembled just slightly. Cora wasn't there anymore. That was the worst part. If the apparition had stayed visible, at least she could pretend it was all in her head. But it vanished, just as it had appeared. One blink, one shiver of shadow in the back seat, and then gone. But not forgotten, not imagined. Maya sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window with an empty gaze. She hadn't said a word since they left Birchfield. Occasionally, her lips would part slightly, like she was mouthing something, but no sound came out. Ava couldn't take her eyes off the road long enough to ask. She was too afraid of what Mia might say. They pulled into a roadside motel off Route 13, the kind of place with flickering vacancy signs and stained carpet that had long surrendered to the scent of mildew. Ava checked them in under a false name. She didn't know why. It wasn't as if the thing in the house needed a reservation to find them, but something in her bones told her names mattered now. Real names were invitations. The room was small, suffocating. One queen bed, a nightstand, a cracked TV bolted to the wall. Ava didn't bother turning it on. Instead, she locked every bolt on the door and pulled the curtains shut, layering a towel against the bottom of the door to block out even the faintest sliver of light from the parking lot. Maya climbed into the bed without a word, her tiny figure curled up like a comma against the edge of the mattress. Ava sat beside her, brushing strands of hair from her daughter's forehead, watching her for any signs of that other presence. She wanted to believe they'd outrun it, that it was the house, not something more. But deep down, she knew it had followed them. That night, Ava dreamed again. But this time, it wasn't the attic or the tunnel or Cora. It was her own childhood home. The place where her mother used to sit by the fireplace and hum lullabies that never had a name. In the dream, everything was too quiet. The fire was lit but gave off no heat. Her mother was there, back turned to her, knitting something with long red thread. Ava stepped forward. "Mom." The woman stopped knitting. Slowly, her head turned, but it wasn't her mother's face. It was Maya's, only older. Pale, lips sewn shut with that same red thread. Mia raised her hand and pointed to the corner of the room. There stood a mirror. Old, fogged, speckled with black spots. Something behind it moved. Then the dream folded in on itself. A sudden snap, a cracking sound, and then silence. Ava awoke with a jolt, the motel room cold, her shirt soaked with sweat. She sat up, heart racing, and checked the bed. Mia was gone. Ava's chest seized. Panic gripped her so tightly it nearly choked her. "Mia," she called out, voice hoarse. Nothing. She threw open the bathroom door, empty. The closet, empty. Then she heard it, a soft knocking. Not on the door, on the mirror. She turned slowly. The mirror above the dresser, small, framed in flaking brass, shivered once. Not a reflection, not movement in the room. No, the glass itself vibrated, like something on the other side had tapped it, just once. And then Mia's voice. Not from outside the room, from inside the mirror. "Mommy." Ava rushed forward, grabbing the sides of the mirror. Her own face stared back at her, pale and terrified. No Mia, no room beyond, just her. Then a flicker. Mia's face flashed in the glass. Her mouth opened in a scream, but no sound came out. Ava raised her hand and touched the surface, cold, then burning hot. She yanked her fingers back, hissing in pain. Behind her, the room changed. Or maybe it always had been that way, and she'd only just noticed. The walls had begun to ripple, subtly, like thin skin stretched over something breathing just behind it. The wallpaper peeled back in long, curling sheets, revealing wood. Not motel drywall, Birchfield wood. Ava staggered back. No, this wasn't real. This wasn't happening. She ran for the door, unbolted every lock in record time, and flung it open. She expected to see the parking lot. Instead, she saw the hallway, Birchfield's hallway. She turned back. The motel room behind her was gone. The door she held was no longer metal and chain. Now it was old wood, thick, warped from time. She was back inside the house. It had taken her back. Without asking, without waiting, without mercy. The hallway stretched before her, darker than it should be. Doors on either side, closed. The grandfather clock ticked somewhere ahead, but the chime was warped, dragging on like a scream held too long. Iva stepped forward, 1 foot at a time. Unable to stop herself, the floorboards groaned, the wallpaper pulsed, the knocking started again. Behind every wall, every door. Knocking. As if every inch of the house wanted to be let out. Then a whisper slithered through the air. "She's in the hollow now. Do you want to see what she sees?" Ava spun around. Cora stood at the far end of the hall, her face stitched in places, her skin bruised and thin like paper soaked in water. Her eyes, once sewn shut, were open now and empty, not blank, just wrong. "What do you want from me?" Ava shouted. Cora tilted her head. "It's not what I want." Then she turned and walked through the wall, not into a room, into the wall itself, vanishing between 2 wooden panels like the air had folded around her. The walls. They weren't just hollow. They were doors. Mia was inside. Ava ran forward, slamming her hands against the panel Cora disappeared through. It didn't move. No knob, no seam. Just smooth old wood. She heard something shift behind her. A door slowly creaked open on its own. The air that came from it was colder than death, and inside a voice whispered. Maya said yes. Iva stepped into the room. The walls closed behind her, and she descended. Not stairs, not a ladder. The floor vanished under her feet, and she fell, not through space, through time, through memory, through something older than thought. Then, she was standing in the hollow. It wasn't a room. It wasn't a tunnel. It was a space between spaces, an endless, stretching void made of wood, nails, and breathing shadows. Faces pressed against the walls, some frozen in screams, some whispering, some smiling with mouths too wide. The floor was slick with water that dripped from nowhere. Or blood. She couldn't tell. In the center of it all was Mia, sitting, silent, surrounded by figures. Some were children, some weren't. They turned to look at Ava as one. And Mia spoke, not with her mouth, but from every direction at once. She's almost here, Mommy. She's waking up. Ava stepped forward, arms outstretched. I'm taking you home. Mia smiled. You are home. The walls around them cracked, and the hollow began to shake. The old one was stirring, and she was hungry. The walls did not shudder like walls. They moved like ribs, expanding, contracting. Drawing in breath from nowhere, and exhaling it in thick clouds that smelled of copper and damp soil. The hollow trembled around Iva, and with each vibration, the faces in the wood turned a little more. Their eyes followed her, some weeping, some wide with joy, others empty. Eyeless sockets that dripped black fluid onto the floor. That wasn't a floor. Her steps didn't echo here. Nothing did. Mia stood just ahead, unmoving. A small figure dwarfed by the grotesque cathedral of wood and sinew around her. She wasn't tied down, not restrained in any visible way, but Ava could feel something holding her. Not ropes, something else. Something thicker than chains and older than stone, belief, acceptance. Mia, Ava whispered, stepping toward her daughter like one might approach a sleeping wolf. But the thing that turned its head in Mia's place wasn't fully Mia anymore. Her daughter's eyes were open, yes, but something swam behind them. Not shadows now. Shapes. Tall, narrow shapes moving too fast to see clearly, like silhouettes flickering between cracks in old doors. Her mouth moved, but the voice that came out didn't belong to her. "She's underneath," Mia said, flat, matter of fact, as if discussing the weather. "And now you've come down too." Ava's hands shook as she reached out, tears threatening to slip down her cheeks. "Mia, please. We need to leave this place." The child smiled with someone else's mouth. "Leave?" she asked, almost curious. "There's nowhere else." "She's in the grain of every beam. She's in the thread of the clothes we wore. She's the voice between words when you think you're alone." A groan rolled through the hollow, deep and wet, like timber bowing under the weight of a storm. The walls pulsed again, and the lights changed. Not that there were any lamps, but something shifted. A dim, reddish glow began to seep through the gaps in the wood. It came from beneath them, from farther down. It was rising. Ava grabbed Maya's hand. "I don't care what this place is. I'm not leaving without you." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Mia blinked once, and something inside her snapped. She screamed. A raw, piercing sound that tore through the hollow like a saw through bone. The air turned brittle, dry. The scream echoed not in Ava's ears, but in her skull, behind her eyes, in her teeth, and when it ended, the hollow responded. The walls opened, not like doors. They split, wide and sudden, like an enormous mouth unhinging, and beyond them, stairs, descending. Too many stairs, a spiral so steep it bent logic. Ava held Maya's hand tightly as they stepped through. The air changed. It was warm. Not just warm, humid. It smelled of blood and breath, of birth and burial. It was the scent of something ancient. The stairs creaked under their feet, each one softer than the last, almost sponge-like. Ava realized, with a rising wave of nausea, that they were not wood anymore. Not fully. They gave beneath her steps, pulsed faintly, and in one spot she thought she saw a vein. The walls grew closer as they went down, then narrower. So narrow Ava had to stoop. Maya didn't. She walked with ease, as if this place had been built for her size, or remade. They reached the bottom after what felt like hours, but Ava knew. She knew. Only minutes had passed. Below was a chamber. Round, walls of warped, bending wood glistened as if coated in something wet. In the center stood a chair, not facing them, facing away. A single bare light bulb swung gently above it, though no cord connected it to anything. Just a light in the dark, and in that chair a figure sat, still, too still. Ava tried to speak, but the air was thick and resistant, like her voice would break if she forced it. Then Mia stepped forward. "She's here," the child said. The figure in the chair stirred. A creaking sound like ice cracking. Ava's feet refused to move. She wanted to run, wanted to scream, wanted to lift her daughter and flee, but her body had locked itself in place. The chair turned slowly. The figure seated in it was wrong. A woman, maybe. Once. Her skin was thin, too thin, drawn tight across a face that seemed stretched, elongated, warped by time or something worse. Her eyes were black pits, filled with soft movement. Her mouth was stitched shut, just like Cora's. Only the thread moved. It wriggled, worm-like. tugging tighter every time the woman tried to speak. And she was trying. Mia stepped beside her, took the figure's hand. "She's so tired," Mia said softly. "So hungry." Ava found her voice. "Let her go." Mia looked back, confused. "She's not holding me," she said. "I'm holding her." Then she pointed to the chair. "She waits for someone to take her place." Ava staggered back. No, she never meant to stay. But the house made her stay. It does that. It learns you. Then it needs you. The figure in the chair groaned. A whisper escaped from the threads. A name. Ava. She froze. The voice wasn't unfamiliar. It wasn't distant or ancient or unknown. It was her mother's. A memory slammed into her like cold water. Her mother, in the old house, humming by the fire. The red thread she always used to mend Ava's clothes. Her sudden illness. The closed casket. The house she grew up in. It had been Birchfield. Not the name, but the bones, the foundation. This house wasn't a house. It was a mouth that never stopped feeding. And it was old. Older than names, older than paper, older than history. Her mother had gone first. Now it wanted her. Behind her, the walls shifted again. A new door had opened. A mirror waited inside. Tall, framed in bone. Mia walked toward it. "Where are you going?" Ava asked, panic rising. Mia turned, one last smile on her face. "She's almost full. But I saved you a place. Just like she saved one for you." Then she stepped through. Gone. The mirror rippled once, then turned black. Ava turned to the woman in the chair. Her mother's mouth moved behind the stitches. She reached out a trembling hand. Ava took it, and felt the thread wrap around her wrist. "Tight," she screamed. But the hollow only whispered. The thread burned the moment it touched her skin. Not like fire, but like memory, sharp, cold, laced with something that didn't belong in this world. Ava yanked her arm back, but it was too late. The red thread had already begun to pull, thin and steady, wrapping itself around her wrist and snaking up her forearm with the slow confidence of something that had done this before. The woman, no, her mother, didn't speak. She couldn't. But her mouth opened wider behind the stitches, her throat flexing like she was screaming silently, begging or warning. It was impossible to tell. Ava's breath caught as the thread wound tighter, constricting her veins. She could feel something inside it, something alive, pulsing against her skin in small, rhythmic spasms. She dropped to her knees, clutching her arm, and stared at the woman in the chair. The longer she looked, the more her features shifted. It was her mother, but also someone else. Her face rippled in brief flashes. Ava saw Cora, then someone older, then someone she didn't recognize at all. Over and over, a lineage of suffering, each face flickering in and out like a slideshow of torment. "No," Ava whispered. "I'm not becoming this." She looked at the mirror where Maya had vanished, its surface now solid black like cooled tar. The room vibrated with the low hum of something stirring beneath it all. Beneath the hollow. Beneath the chair. Beneath the floor. And in that hum, she could hear names. Dozens, hundreds, all spoken at once in voices too mangled to identify. Ava's name was among them. She stumbled back from the chair, dragging the red thread behind her like a leash, only it pulled. It fought. It wanted her to stay. The chamber was closing in, the walls slowly folding inward with wet sounds, as if the house had grown tired of patience. She had to move. She had to break the cycle. She had to get Mia back. There was no door now, no stairs, no escape. Only the mirror and the thread. She stood, cradling her arm, blood beginning to seep from beneath the tight coil of crimson. Her pulse echoed through the thread, and something responded, tugging gently, almost coaxing her closer to the chair. The woman, the echo of her mother, raised one trembling hand, pointing to the mirror. Her stitched mouth moved again. Not random, not desperate. She was mouthing the word follow. Ava didn't trust the mirror. She didn't trust the house. But the only other option was to stay, to take the chair, to wait until the next victim arrived and called her name in the dark. She couldn't allow that. Wouldn't. With one last glance at the thing in the chair, Ava stepped toward the mirror, dragging the thread behind her. It grew heavier with each step, as though it had roots, as though the house itself resisted her movement. When she reached the glass, she expected to see her reflection. Instead, she saw Mia. But not the Mia she'd left. This Mia was different, older by years, maybe more, pale and still, standing in what looked like Birchfield's upstairs hallway. She was staring at something just off frame, face frozen in fear. Then Ava saw it. Something moved behind Mia. Tall, thin, human-shaped, but wrong. Its arms bent the wrong way. Its legs dragged, but not because of weight. It was as if the floor didn't want it walking on it. It had no face, only a long, open slit running down the center of its head like a second mouth. From it, thin, red threads spilled, snaking across the floor. "Maya!" Ava screamed, pressing her hands to the mirror. The girl didn't react. She couldn't hear her. Then, suddenly, the creature turned. No, twisted, its head. And it looked directly at Ava. Not at the mirror. At her, wherever she was. Wherever this thing wasn't, it could see her through the glass. And it smiled. The mirror shattered. But not outward. Inward. It pulled her. Sucked her into a darkness so thick it muffled her thoughts before it muffled her screams. She didn't fall. She was absorbed, swallowed, stretched into something not entirely human for a moment, then rebuilt on the other side. She landed hard, on tile. Clean. Cold. She opened her eyes. She was in the bathroom of Birchfield House. Except it wasn't as she remembered it. The walls were too smooth. The fixtures too new. The light too bright. Everything was pristine, empty, dead, and she was alone. The thread was gone. So was the blood. But a voice echoed behind her. She said you'd come back. Ava turned. The mirror over the sink showed her reflection now. But there was something else. A word written in the fog, though the room wasn't steamed. Underneath. She rushed from the bathroom, calling Mia's name. The hallway looked familiar, but something about it was off. Every picture frame was empty. Every doorknob ice cold. The air was silent. No whispers, no creaks, no breathing walls. It was worse, because it meant something had changed. She checked every room. No Mia. No sign of her. Just dustless floors and sealed windows that revealed nothing but a gray, fog, thick void outside. The world had been swallowed by the house. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Downstairs. Heavy. Not Maya's. She crept down the stairs, each one sounding louder than the last. The foyer was different. The chandelier had grown. It now hung all the way to the floor, each crystal shard long, thin, almost sharp. Beneath it stood a figure. It wasn't the faceless creature, nor was it her mother. This one wore a long, black dress that touched the floor like pooled ink. She had hair, long and dark, covering most of her face, but Ava could see enough. The smile was too wide, her eyes too flat. She held something in her hands. A bundle of red thread. Looking for this, she asked, holding it up. Ava clenched her fists. Where is Mia? The woman tilted her head, childlike. She's beneath the house now, she said sweetly. Playing with the others. You didn't pull her out fast enough. Ava stepped forward. Give her back. Oh no, dear, the woman cooed. You don't ask the hollow. You bargain with it. The red thread danced between the woman's fingers. One soul for another. One seat for a child. You already started the stitch. It's in your blood now. You just need to sit. No. The woman frowned. Her smile split even wider. Then the girl stays. And with that, she was gone. Vanished in a blink. Only the bundle of thread remained on the floor. Still pulsing. Still waiting. Ava fell to her knees, breathing hard. She picked it up, and it tightened around her fingers like it had always belonged there. The house moaned softly above her, and she knew Birchfield was alive, and it wanted to be fed. Ava sat motionless on the cold floor of Birchfield's foyer, the red thread wound tight in her palm like a heartbeat not her own. It throbbed against her skin in pulses too deliberate to be random. It was waiting, coiling, measuring her. She could feel it inching up her wrist again, but slower this time, almost curious. Like it was testing her resolve. The house breathed around her, soft and heavy, the walls expanding in slow rhythm, boards creaking with unseen weight. Every light bulb hummed faintly, giving off more sound than glow, and the chandeliers above her trembled as though stirred by some low sound coming from beneath the floorboards. She knew now what the hollow was. Not a place, not really. It was a hunger, a memory made flesh, and Birchfield was its throat. She could feel the gravity of it everywhere, pulling her down, always down, toward the core, toward the place where Mia had been taken, toward the others. She clutched the thread tighter and felt it pull back, as if satisfied, as if the decision had already been made. The woman in black had said she needed to bargain, that she had to offer one soul for another. Iva didn't believe her. Not fully. It might be a trick. But that voice, that oily sweetness behind every word, had seemed too sure, too comfortable. Like someone who'd made the same deal many times before. And now that Ava had touched the thread again, she feared she had already agreed to more than she understood. She forced herself to stand. Her legs shook beneath her, weak from fear and from something else. Fatigue that went deeper than the body. Like the house was leeching something from her, thread by thread, heartbeat by heartbeat. She moved down the hall toward the basement door, passing the kitchen where appliances hummed in broken sink. Drawers that she knew she had shut now hung, open like mouths waiting to speak. Every window she passed revealed only that same churning gray outside, as if the world itself had been erased the moment she returned. She reached the pantry, found the door behind it once more, and braced herself. The latch groaned as she pulled it open. This time, no scent of rot poured out. No warning, just silence, and stairs that seemed longer than before, fading into darkness with a subtle curve that made her stomach turn. She gripped the bundle of thread tighter in one hand and descended. Each step was softer than the last. Halfway down, she noticed something strange. Her footsteps didn't echo. They were being swallowed, not by sound, but by texture. The wood beneath her shoes felt pliable, almost soft. She paused, lifted her foot. The step she had just left rippled, like skin. She nearly turned back, nearly fled up the stairs, and tried to claw her way out of this nightmare. But then she heard it, Maya's voice. Faint, strangled, echoing up from somewhere impossibly far below. Mommy, and Ava knew that if she hesitated now, she'd never hear her daughter again. She pushed forward. The staircase eventually ended in a long, sloping corridor lined with wood that looked less like paneling and more like stretched bone. Long, thin fibers ran between the walls like nerves. The floor dipped slightly as she walked, like she was stepping on muscle that tensed and relaxed with her every move. Then she reached a door. Not wood, not metal. It was made of teeth, human teeth, polished, yellowed, and fitted together like puzzle pieces. In the center was a small hollow socket, and the thread in her hand pulsed violently. She didn't want to know what it wanted, but her hand moved anyway, guided by something deeper than thought. She pressed the bundle of thread into the socket. The teeth groaned, then smiled. The door opened inward, and Ava stepped into a space that didn't belong in any world she understood. It was not dark, not fully. A dull red glow came from every direction, floor, walls, ceiling, all of which were covered in faces, not carved, not painted, real, merged into the surface, eyes wide open, lips stretched in silence. Some wept, others watched her. A few smiled. At the far end of the room stood a table, an altar. Upon it, Maya lay still, her arms at her sides, her chest barely rising. She looked asleep. But Ava knew that wasn't sleep. She rushed forward, reaching for her daughter, and slammed into something invisible. A wall, cold, buzzing like static, solid as stone. Ava pounded on it with her fists, screamed Mia's name, tears already pouring down her cheeks. Then the voice returned, closer this time. Love is a sharp thread, Ava. Ava turned. The woman in black stood just behind her. No sound, No warning. Her dress dragged on the floor, weaving into the nerves like roots burrowing into flesh. "You can't pull one soul without snagging another," she said, smiling with perfect teeth. "That's how the hollow stays alive." Ava backed away from her, fists clenched. "You said I could bargain." "You can." "You did." "You touched the thread." "You walked back into her mouth." "You heard her name and answered." "That was the call." Her voice softened. "You're the one who opened the door, Ava. You always were." Ava shook her head. "No, I just wanted my daughter back. And so did your mother." Ava stopped. The woman stepped closer. "You think you were the first. You think this house found you by chance. She gave herself to spare you, and the hollow gave you back to her." It hit Ava then, her mother's sudden death. The casket never opened. The things she said in her last weeks, how she'd been seeing something in the mirrors, the red thread she stitched into Ava's clothes without explanation. She'd known. And now Ava did too. The hollow wasn't just a place. It was a cycle, a trap woven with grief and sacrifice. The way out had always been through someone else's suffering. Ava faced the altar again. Mia hadn't moved. Her daughter was being held in stasis, trapped in the exact moment of decision. The woman's voice was at her ear now, cold and intimate. "All you have to do is take her place. Sit on the chair. Let the thread finish what it started. You'll dream forever, Ava. She'll wake up whole. She'll live, laugh, forget. And me," Ava asked, barely able to speak, "you'll remember. But no one else will. That's the gift." Ava closed her eyes. She could feel the weight of the decision, not on her mind, but on her skin. The thread still wrapped her wrist. Still pulsing, still waiting, she stepped forward toward the altar. Maya's face was peaceful. Her lips parted slightly, a whisper of breath escaping. "Mommy," the invisible wall began to dissolve. The hollow was opening, accepting. But then Ava stopped. "No," she whispered, "I won't feed her. I won't give her what she wants." The woman tilted her head. "Then she'll take both of you." Ava turned, holding the bundle of thread in both hands. "What happens if I break it?" she asked. The woman's smile faltered. "That's not allowed." Ava gripped the thread tighter and pulled. It screamed. Not the woman. The house. The walls cracked. The faces wailed. The glow turned violent, red and thrashing like fire. The floor beneath her pulsed wildly. The thread writhed, fighting back, burning her palms, slicing into her skin. But she didn't stop. She pulled harder, until it snapped, and the hollow roared. Everything folded inward, walls, ceiling, air itself. The faces screamed in unison. The altar split in two, the light from inside bursting like a flare. Ava was flung backward, crashing into the soft wall of nerve and bone. The woman in black vanished, her dress crumpling to the ground like ash. And Mia opened her eyes. She blinked, sat up. "Mummy?" Ava crawled to her, pulling her close, sobbing into her hair. "We're leaving," she whispered. "We're done." But the house wasn't. It began to collapse. Not like a building, like a dying animal. The walls heaved, the faces screamed, and everything turned to dark. As Ava held Mia close, the floor gave out, and they fell, together, through the hollow. Into whatever came next, they fell in silence. Not through air, not through space, through something denser, thicker, like water laced with ash. Ava clutched Mia against her chest, arms wrapped so tightly around the girl that her knuckles burned. But even as they plunged downward, she couldn't stop shaking. Not from the cold, from the knowing. The kind of knowing that settled in the blood and would never leave. They were no longer falling through a place. They were falling through her. Through the thing that had made the house its mouth and the walls its skin. Through the hollow itself. And still it watched them. Faces bloomed from the dark around them, only visible for a breath, a flicker, then gone. Children, women, men, all vanished, all taken. And Ava realized with bone, deep dread, that these weren't the souls the hollow had consumed. These were the pieces it had kept, the fragments of their last moments, screams, cries, final prayers caught in mid-sentence, and suspended here in the dark like moths trapped in amber. Then, without warning, the fall ended. They hit something solid, but not hard, more like a surface that gave just enough to break the fall without stopping it clean. Ava gasped as her knees struck the ground, arms still locked around Maya. The girl stirred, groaned softly, and looked up. Mummy. Her voice was real now. No echo, no static hidden beneath it. Ava ran her fingers through Maya's hair, pulling her close, holding her like she would vanish again if she so much as blinked. I've got you. I've got you. We're okay. But even as the words left her lips, she didn't believe them, because the world around them was still too quiet. They stood in a room that wasn't a room. There were no walls, no ceiling. Just an endless gray void stretching in every direction. But beneath their feet, something like floor existed. Polished, mirror-like. Ava looked down and saw herself reflected in perfect clarity, but her reflection didn't mimic her. It stared back, expressionless, lips slightly parted, watching. And Mia's reflection, it had no eyes. Ava pulled her gaze away, heart racing. She looked to the far edges of the space. Though far wasn't the right word. Distance was strange here. Everything felt too close and too far at once, like a dream she couldn't quite wake from. Then, in the distance, a shape formed. Something massive, towering, like a figure crouched in the void, hunched and folded in on itself, its edges impossible to define. It breathed. A long, slow breath that made the mirror floor ripple outward like a pond. The shape shifted, unfolded. Ava took a step back, then it spoke. No words. Just a sound. A guttural vibration that crawled into her bones and settled behind her eyes. Mia clutched her mother's hand, whispering, "It's her." Ava didn't ask who. She knew. The one beneath, the one who fed. The one Birchfield was built around, or built for. She stepped in front of Maya, shielding her as the shadow figure rose to its full height. Ava couldn't see a face, only a vast, moving wall of flesh and hollows, pulsing with slow, terrible rhythm. Arms, or what might have once been arms, dragged behind it, long and skeletal, bent in angles that defied all reason. And somewhere in the center of that mass, a mouth opened. Not a mouth of teeth, a mouth of thread. Red cords spilled forth, twisting like snakes. Seeking. They fanned out across the floor, gliding toward Ava and Maya with slow, deliberate hunger. But something had changed. Ava no longer backed away. She stood her ground. Her voice, when she spoke, was not loud. But it was clear. You don't get her. The thing paused. The threads hovered inches from her feet. The reflection below her rippled. And this time, Ava's mirrored self looked afraid. "You took my mother," she said, voice steady. "You tried to take me. You tried to stitch yourself into my daughter. But you've made a mistake." A low rumble echoed across the void, as if the creature were laughing, or growling. "I'm not like the others," Ava continued. "I don't run. I don't beg. You fed on fear, on silence, on sacrifice. But I broke your thread, and I'll keep breaking it." The threads lunged. Ava grabbed Mia and ran, not away, but into the mass, straight toward the creature. The mirror beneath their feet shattered as they ran, shards flying upward instead of falling, spinning in the air like teeth knocked from a jaw. The floor buckled, warped, dissolved, but Ava didn't stop. She saw the place where the threads emerged, the heart of the hollow. And there, buried in the meat of the creature, stood the chair. The same one from the altar room, except now it wasn't empty. Someone sat in it, a figure wrapped in layers of red thread, face hidden, but Ava knew. It was herself, or something shaped like her. The moment they neared it, the air thickened like syrup. The thread screamed, a sound like metal being torn apart. Ava forced her way forward, clawing at the thread-covered figure. She reached out and touched the face beneath the wrappings. It opened its eyes, her own. She stared into herself, and the creature paused. Everything paused. The world hung on a knife edge. Then Ava did something simple. She let go. Not of Maya, not of the fight, She let go of the fear. She stopped running. She stood and said only one word. No. The reflection shattered. The mirror beneath them, the shards above, the very shape of the creature, collapsed inward. The thread burned to ash. The ground cracked. Light, real light, pierced the skyless void, slicing through the black with painful clarity. The hollow screamed and vanished. Ava felt her body wrench upward, pulled, lifted, thrown. She and Maya flew through the airless dark, and then they landed. Hard, wood beneath them. But not alive, cold. Still. Birchfield. They were back in the house. The real one. The floors didn't breathe. The walls didn't weep. Ava sat up, coughing, pulling Mia close. The girl was awake, alert, eyes wide. The morning sun poured through the broken front window. Somehow they had made it out. The house was quiet, almost peaceful. But Ava knew. Birchfield had not died. Only slept, and beneath its bones, in the hollow no longer visible, something was waiting to stitch itself back together. But not today. Not with her blood. Not with Maya's. She stood slowly, holding her daughter in her arms. And for the first time in what felt like lifetimes, they walked out the front door. Without looking back, the front door of Birchfield groaned on its rusted hinges as Ava pulled it open, a long, reluctant breath from a house that seemed loath to let them go. Sunlight, real sunlight, poured across the threshold, flooding the dust, choked air with warmth that stung Ava's eyes. It felt wrong, unreal. A lie whispered in the language of peace. She hesitated, standing there with Maya in her arms, afraid that if she stepped over that line, the house would snap shut behind them like a jaw, as if the light itself were bait. But nothing happened. She moved through it. Each step across the warped front boards felt like treading over a grave, and as her foot met the first patch of overgrown lawn beyond the door, something inside her loosened. Not relief, not victory, just pressure, hundreds of pounds of tension uncoiling in her spine. Mia stirred against her, whispering something she couldn't understand, her breath hot against Ava's neck. Behind them, the house stood in silence. No groan, no whisper, just stillness, as if waiting. They didn't speak on the walk down the long gravel path that twisted through the fog-thin trees. The air was cool, the scent of wet moss and pine replacing the rot and mold that had infested every corner of Birchfield's hollow frame. Birds chirped overhead, soft and intermittent, as if even nature had to tiptoe in the shadow of that place. By the time they reached the car, the sun had climbed higher, bleeding through the gray sky with a soft persistence. Ava slid into the driver's seat. Mia nestled into the passenger side, still silent, still pale. Her small fingers toyed with a frayed patch on her sleeve, eyes distant. Ava turned the key. The engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life. For a moment, she just sat there gripping the wheel, unsure what to do. Where to go? Who she even was outside of Birchfield's nightmare. She didn't remember much of the world before it, not clearly. Just flashes. Arguments, divorce papers, Maya's birthday parties, coffee grown cold at her desk as she stared into blank documents. That life felt thin now, fragile. Like a paper mask soaked through with rain, she pulled away from the house without a word. The road wound back toward the town, and as they crested the first hill, Birchfield vanished behind them, swallowed by trees, its black roof barely peeking above the canopy like a warning. They didn't look back, but that didn't mean it was over. By the time they reached Birchfield town proper, the streets were empty. Sunday morning, Ava assumed at first, but then she noticed the storefronts. Every one of them closed, lights off, windows curtained, as if the entire town had collectively decided not to look outside today. As if they knew. Ava stopped in front of the gas station. The pump was old, the kind that still clicked mechanically with every dollar, but it worked. She filled the tank, her eyes scanning the horizon. No cars, no movement, just silence. Then she saw him, the sheriff, standing just outside his office across the street, leaning against the doorframe, watching. He didn't wave, didn't call out, just nodded once. Ava stared at him, waiting, daring him to say something, anything, but he didn't move. Didn't blink. She got back in the car, drove away. As they left the edge of town, Mia finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, cracked from disuse. Is she gone? Ava didn't answer right away. She couldn't lie. Not anymore. I don't know, she said. But we're not going back. Maya was silent for a while. Then, almost too soft to hear, she said, she's in my dreams. Ava's hands tightened on the wheel. She didn't ask which Mia meant. The answer was already there, lingering like a bruise on the back of her mind. Ava had pulled her daughter from the hollow, yes, but the hollow had left something in its place. A mark, a tether. Something just beneath the surface of Maya's gaze, swimming in the shadows of her thoughts. They drove for hours. Put state lines behind them. The forests thinned, then vanished. Towns grew bigger. The sky turned the golden gray of a sun that didn't quite trust itself to shine. Eventually, they stopped at a motel far from any road Ava recognized. A little place with a red neon sign buzzing faintly in the wind. The man at the counter didn't ask for ID, just handed her the key and nodded. Room 6. That night, Ava lay in the second bed, staring at the ceiling while Mia slept. Her daughter had curled up tightly on her side, hugging a worn pillow, her breath slow and even. And then, at 3:03 a.m. she spoke, not in her voice, in hers. The woman in black, she's waiting Ava. Ava sat up straight, heart pounding, the room tilting around her. Maya's eyes were closed, but her mouth moved again. She needs the house rebuilt. Ava shook her. Mia, wake up. She needs new wood, new names, and a chair. Mia. The child's eyes flew open. She gasped, then sat up and sobbed into her mother's arms. I didn't want to say it, she cried. I didn't want her in me. Ava held her, rocked her, kissed the top of her head. It's not your fault, she whispered. She's not in you. But as she said it, she looked toward the bathroom mirror. There, faintly, a thread of red stretched from the edge of the glass to the floor. It was pulsing, like a heartbeat, waiting. Birchfield was gone. But the hollow wasn't. It had learned their names, and now it wanted to grow. They didn't stay more than a night in the motel. Ava woke before the sun rose, stuffed their things back into the car with mechanical precision, and got Mia dressed while she was still too groggy to argue. There was no breakfast, no small talk, no time. The red thread in the bathroom mirror hadn't vanished by morning. It had grown longer. When Ava looked back one last time before shutting the door, she could swear it had begun to reach. Not down, but across. As if it were learning how to crawl. They drove again. Nowhere planned. No map. Just highways and side roads, fields and ghost towns, gas stations that smelled like old oil and broken dreams. Ava didn't know what she was looking for, only what she needed to escape. And yet, no matter how far they went, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was always watching from just behind them, like headlights that never passed or a shadow that never quite left the road. Mia sat quietly most of the day. When she spoke, it was in murmurs, questions Ava didn't know how to answer. What if she finds another house? Will she make one herself? Can dreams spread? Ava tried. She tried to explain that they had broken something, that the hollow had cracked like a shell, and maybe, just maybe, they'd fractured its hold on their world. But Mia only stared out the window, her reflection in the glass unnervingly, still even when she turned her head. It made Ava nauseous every time she caught sight of it. By the third day, they came across a small town called Haybrook. Population maybe a few hundred. A main street that looked untouched by time. One diner, a hardware store, and a few sleepy houses arranged like pieces on a board someone forgot to finish playing. It should have felt safe, but nothing did anymore. Still, Ava pulled into the single motel on the edge of town and asked for a room. She was tired of running with no sleep, tired of jumping at every shadow, and most of all, she needed time to think. That night, She let Maya sleep in the bed closest to the door. She pushed a heavy dresser against it after locking both bolts and laid out a ring of salt around her daughter's side of the room. It was absurd, she knew, but there was no room left for pride. The hollow had followed logic once, and then cracked it in half. She stayed awake until midnight. Then came the sound, not from inside the room, from outside, knocking, soft, slow, 3 knocks, then silence. Ava rose, tiptoed to the window, and peeled back the curtain. There was nothing, no one. But the street lamp across the road flickered once, then popped, and under its broken light stood something that hadn't been there an hour earlier. A new house, plain, Victorian style, 2 stories. Fresh paint that hadn't existed the day before. Ava's breath hitched. It looked exactly like Birchfield. But it wasn't Birchfield. This one had no rot. No cracked shingles, no leaning foundation. It was perfect. Clean, too clean, and already someone was moving inside. A man and a woman, new to town, she guessed, carrying boxes through the open door, laughing, like this was all normal. Like they hadn't just walked into the mouth of something unspeakable. Ava stepped back from the window, pulse racing. It had started again. The hollow had planted a new seed, and it had learned how to hide. She didn't sleep. In the morning, she and Mia walked into town. The locals were friendly enough, smiling with a kind of forced cheer that made Ava's skin crawl. When she asked about the new house, the clerk at the diner counter just blinked. What new house? The one on Bayard Street, Ava said, across from the old mill. The clerk frowned. There's no house there, just a lot. Been empty since the fire. Ava said nothing. She just nodded, took the coffee, and left. That night, she walked to the end of Bayard alone. The house was still there, lights on, curtains drawn. Inside, she saw silhouettes moving. A tall man, a woman, and a little girl. They looked happy, but the light coming from their windows wasn't quite right. Too yellow, too warm, like it came from something burning behind the glass. And in the second floor window, Ava saw it, just for a second. A woman in black, not in the room, behind the curtain, smiling, watching. The hollow hadn't just followed them, it had started rebuilding. Ava went back to the motel, locked every door, and sat down with Mia. It started again, she said. Mia didn't cry. She only nodded. I saw her in the mirror again, the girl whispered. She was in a hallway, but it wasn't ours. Ava felt something in her heart twist and snap. We have to stop her. But how? Ava didn't have the answer yet. But she had an idea. You couldn't kill something that fed on memory. But maybe, just maybe, you could starve it. You could warn others. Make them believe before it was too late. And if the hollow needed houses, needed walls and doors and mirrors, then Ava would become the thing it feared most. The one who knew how it grew. The one who remembered. She opened her notebook. The one she used to write stories. And for the first time since Birchfield, she picked up a pen. At the top of the first blank page, she wrote Dionauden Tarticha IC, then, beneath it, if you skierediadrurediancd. The hollow wanted to spread, but Ava Munro had survived its hunger. And now, she was going to speak. Louder than it ever expected. Ava wrote through the night. She didn't stop, didn't eat, didn't drink. Her hand moved with a kind of focused desperation, dragging black ink across the pages like stitching her sanity together letter by letter. Every word pulled something out of her, not just memory, but pieces of the hollow still clinging to the folds of her mind. The faces, the red thread, the chair, the mirrored floor, the bone, white teeth of the door. Each sentence bled onto the page like a cut, and every time she paused to breathe, she expected to look up and find the walls closing in again. But they didn't. Mia slept quietly behind her, bundled in blankets with her back to the window. Ava kept the curtains shut tight. She hadn't dared look outside since sunset, but she could feel the presence of the new house pressing against the air like a bulge beneath wallpaper. It was there, fully formed now. It had nested. She knew what would come next. The way the walls would bend to the will of the thing inside. The way the windows would never quite reflect what they should. And how, soon, someone in that house would start to hear a knock that no one else could hear. But she also knew something else. Birchfield had tried to make her forget, tried to stitch her into silence. But she remembered everything. And memory, she realized, was both a weapon and a warning. By dawn, she had 26 handwritten pages. Some of it read like madness, some like journal entries. Others, like instructions whispered from someone already too deep inside to climb out. She read it once, aloud, and her own voice trembled at the sound of it. There was power in those words. Not magic, not curses, truth. And truth, spoken plainly, had the kind of weight even darkness struggled to carry. She made copies. Photocopied them at a corner store just outside town, telling the cashier she was publishing a local horror zine. He didn't even blink, just handed her the warm stack and wished her luck. That night, while Mia rested, Ava walked Haybrook alone. She slid pages under doors, taped them to bus stops, left them in mailboxes. Some she tucked inside library books, others she hid in bathroom stalls and grocery store bulletin boards. Each page marked with the same title, handwritten in red marker across the top. The Has follows no name, no author, just story. A breadcrumb trail for the curious, the cautious, and, most importantly, the ones who might still listen. By the time she returned to the motel, the sun was rising. The sky was streaked with that strange pink, gray that always reminded her of bruised skin. She poured herself a cup of stale motel coffee and stared at the wall opposite her bed, heart still racing. Not from fear anymore, from expectation, because it had seen her. And now it would have to decide whether to come for her again, or retreat. That night, Mia woke screaming. Iva rushed to her, holding her close, brushing the sweat from her brow. Tell me, she whispered. What did you see? Maya's voice trembled. It wasn't the same house. It was new, but she was in it. She had a mirror, and she was sewing something. What? The girl gulped. A face. Ava didn't sleep after that. She sat by the window with the curtains drawn open, just a crack, watching the street. The house across the road glowed softly through its windows. It looked calm, peaceful. But Ava knew. She could feel the breathing behind the glass. The hollow had nested. It had its new hosts. But something strange happened the next day. The couple who had moved into the house walked into the diner, and they looked tired, worn. He had circles under his eyes. She kept scratching at her arms. Ava sat a few booths over, silent, observing. Then she saw it. The woman pulled something from her purse. A piece of paper. Her paper. She handed it to her husband, who squinted at it, then looked out the window toward their new home. Something passed between them. A silence. Then the man got up and walked to the payphone outside. 15 minutes later, Iva watched from her booth as a black sedan pulled up to the curb. The couple stepped out of the diner and met the driver, an older man in a charcoal suit who walked with urgency. The three of them stood together in the street for several long minutes. The woman kept pointing to the house. The man kept shaking his head. Then, without ever stepping back inside, they got into the sedan and left everything behind. The house stayed, but it was empty again, and the hollow. It pulsed, angry. Ava could feel it in her teeth. That night, her motel mirror cracked down the center. A spiderweb fracture. No impact, just a wound. The next morning, she found one of her pages taped to the door of the grocery store with a note scribbled over it, "Are there more houses?" It had begun. People were listening. She printed more copies. This time, she left them in bus stations 3 towns over, tucked into magazines and airport terminals. She started posting excerpts online under false names. Stories. Warnings. Diagrams of doors that shouldn't open and corners that shouldn't echo. Every single page bore her unspoken vow, undoanti ledi ar buildgin, and still the hollow moved. It didn't always build full houses. Sometimes it built moments. A hallway where there wasn't one. A mirror too old to match its surroundings. A humming that seemed to have no source. Once, Ava found a single red thread wound tight around the base of her motel sink faucet. She burned it. She flushed the ash. But she knew. It was only a matter of time before it tried again. And when it did, she'd be there. Waiting, not just to survive, but to starve it. Because something older than her had learned to build that hollow. But Ava Monroe, she was learning how to tear it down. Ava Monroe was no longer running, she was chasing. Each day brought her closer to the shape of something she could never quite see, but could always feel. The hollow was clever. It didn't rise all at once, didn't announce itself with tremors or screams. It returned like a scent on the air, like mildew blooming behind wallpaper, like the faint vibration in a floorboard before it breaks. And Ava had learned its rhythm. She could sense it now. The tension in her spine when she entered a town it had touched. The hush in the local library when no one could recall the name of the previous tenants. The glances people exchanged when someone mentioned a house that shouldn't exist. Maya had changed too. She was quieter but clearer. She didn't speak of dreams anymore. She read them. Woke in the night with names on her lips. Whispered addresses Ava would scribble onto motel notepads. Someone knew, she'd say, eyes foggy. She's building again. And they'd drive. Always at night. Always in silence. The road had become their world. The car, their coffin of motion. There was no home anymore, not in the traditional sense. Not when home had become a target. It was in Hollow Creek, 2 states east, where Ava saw the signs again. A family of 5 had moved into a house that hadn't been on any real estate listings. Ava had checked. Rechecked. She stood across the street in the rain, watching through the windshield as movers carried in furniture under a porch that had not existed a week prior. The siding was pale blue, too fresh, the grass already perfectly grown. Not a single weed, not a single flaw, as if it had been born, not built. She didn't approach the family. Not yet. There was always a pattern. The hollow never swallowed them whole. It liked to digest slowly. First came the dreams, then the tapping, then the voice. So she waited, 3 days in a rented room, 2 blocks over, watching, recording. At night, she heard it the chime of a clock that didn't belong to any house in town. 12 slow notes, warped and stretched. The same sound Birchfield's grandfather clock had made before its gears rotted out. The sound that marked the beginning of the unraveling. Maya hadn't slept in those 3 days. She drew instead. Her pages were covered in thin, black ink, doorways, thread, mirrors. And in the center of every page, the woman in black, always faceless, her hands cupped together, like she was offering something Ava didn't dare accept. On the 4th day, Ava left her in the room with instructions, don't open the door, no matter who knocks. She crossed the street and stood on the sidewalk across from the new house. The hollow's new seed. A woman opened the front door before Ava could even knock. She had tired eyes and a cautious smile. One of those polite expressions that said you're welcome to speak, but don't stay long. Hi, Ava said, voice steady. I'm sorry to bother you. I used to live here. The woman tilted her head. That's not possible. This house was just built. Was it? Silence. Ava took a chance. Have you noticed anything strange? At night, the woman's smile faltered. Just for a second. Who are you? Someone who's trying to help you. Ava held out a folded page, one of her copies. The woman didn't take it. I think you should leave, she said, voice lower now. My husband doesn't like. Then she stopped. Her eyes widened slightly. She looked past Ava toward something behind her. Not down the street, not into the sky, but up, as if something was above the house. Watching, Ava turned, nothing. But the shadow cast across the lawn was too long for the sun's position. The hollow was listening. It knew her now, and it wasn't hiding. Ava backed away slowly. If you hear knocking, she said, don't answer. And if you see a red thread, cut it. The woman said nothing. Just shut the door. And behind it Ava heard something hum. Not the voice of a person, the house itself, satisfied, amused, hungry. She returned to Mia. The girl was sitting on the edge of the bed, eyes fixed on the window. She's not going to leave that family alone, Mia said without turning. She likes the little boy. He's afraid of the dark. Ava sat beside her. We have to warn them again. They won't listen yet. I know. Mia handed her a drawing. It was a staircase, wending downward, sharp-angled like a screw. At the bottom stood a door. It was open. And from inside it, red thread spilled across the floor, curling toward a pair of feet just outside the frame. I think this one's growing faster, Mia said. She's building underneath the house before she finishes the top. That chilled Ava more than anything else. The hollow had learned. It was adapting, evolving, no longer waiting to be fed. It was preparing its meals early. She stood. She couldn't save everyone. Not yet. But she could slow the spread. Ava printed more copies of the manuscript that night and drove to 3 surrounding towns. Left pages in waiting rooms. Taped them to utility poles. Slipped them into laundromats and bus benches and grocery store carts. Everywhere someone might stumble upon the truth. She returned to the motel before sunrise and found Mia asleep, finally, but twitching. Whimpering. A nightmare. Ava sat beside her, stroking her hair. Shh, she whispered. I'm here. We're not going back. But in the shadows near the motel bathroom mirror, she saw it. A thread. Red. Coiled gently around the base of the faucet like a ribbon tied in warning. She stood and pulled it slowly, carefully, hand shaking. It unraveled like it had been left for her. And when the last inch came loose, she found something knotted at the end, a tooth. A child's molar, smooth, white, fresh. The hollow wasn't waiting anymore. It was calling her back, piece by piece, memory by memory. And Ava knew, as she stared down at that perfect, bloodless tooth. The next time she found the house, it would already know everything about her. Ava didn't sleep after the tooth. She couldn't. It sat on the bathroom sink like it had grown there, not placed, not delivered, but birthed from the mirror's slow, breathing surface. She watched it for hours, trying to ignore the way it pulsed faintly in the dim motel light, like it still belonged to a living mouth. A part of her wanted to smash it, grind it beneath her heel and scatter the dust, but something deeper held her back. Not fear. Recognition. The shape of it, the curve of the root, she knew it wasn't Maya's. She would have known. She had to know. Still, the tooth was familiar, in a way that made her feel sick. The hollow was leaving breadcrumbs now, but not to lure her forward. It was marking its territory. This was no longer just about new houses and families who couldn't hear the knocking. It was personal. The hollow didn't just want to rebuild itself. It wanted Ava to see it happen. Wanted her to feel it rising from the cracks in the world she thought she had escaped. And worst of all, it wanted her to remember. By sunrise, she wrapped the tooth in a napkin and dropped it in the motel's ice machine. Buried under frozen cubes, out of sight. She didn't know why, only that the idea of tossing it in the trash felt wrong, like discarding a message she hadn't yet read. Mia woke up hours later, slow and glassy-eyed, her voice hoarse. She didn't mention the tooth. She didn't mention the thread. She only said, "There's a new room in the house." Ava turned from the window. Where? Under the stairs. Which house? Mia looked up then, and in her eyes was something Ava hadn't seen in a long time. Not fear, not confusion. Clarity, not one we've found yet. Ava didn't ask more. There was no need. When Mia spoke like that, it wasn't a guess. It was something deeper. A thread of knowledge pulled directly from the place where the hollow stirred. That girl had been touched by it, held in its mouth, and though she'd been freed, its breath still lingered in her bones. They left the motel that morning, driving west along roads Ava didn't remember choosing. The sky grew dim with cloud cover. the kind that looked like smoke curling down from somewhere higher. As they passed through nameless towns, Mia would occasionally glance at a house or street corner and shake her head. Not it. Not yet. It wasn't until dusk that they saw it. It sat at the end of a cull, desac just outside of Larch Hollow. A town Ava had never heard of, though it looked old enough to predate the road signs. The house was wrong, even before she fully understood why. Wrong in its angles, wrong in its posture. Like it leaned forward just slightly, eager to greet them. A single porch light flickered above a red door that looked painted with something darker than paint. The curtains didn't sway. The windows didn't reflect. "That's it," Mia said quietly. Ava parked 2 streets away. They walked the last stretch on foot. There were no for sale signs, no moving boxes, yet a porch swing swayed, as if someone had just stood up from it. The front door creaked open. No one stepped out, no voice called, but the gesture was unmistakable. Ava turned to Maya. "You stay here." "No," the girl said. "You can't go in alone." That's what it wants. But Ava had already crossed the threshold. The air inside was dry, not dusty, too clean, like it had been scrubbed of memory, scrubbed of history. That was always the first thing she noticed when the hollow rebuilt. It erased everything before it began. The entryway was a replica of Birchfield, down to the pattern in the floorboards. But it wasn't a copy. It was it. The walls seemed to breathe with the same rhythm. And from the far end of the hall, Iva heard a soft sound. A knock, under the stairs. 3 times. She moved carefully, passing empty picture frames and mirrors that showed only fog. She stopped in front of the staircase and knelt. There had been no crawl space in the original Birchfield. But here, a panel had been carved cleanly into the wall. It was ajar, revealing nothing but darkness. Ava reached inside. Her fingers brushed fabric. She pulled it out slowly. A dress, tiny, pale blue, child-sized. She recognized the stitching. The same hem she'd sewn herself for Mia's first-grade picture day. But Mia had never worn blue that year. Ava remembered now. She'd picked yellow. So why was the memory different? Ava clutched the dress tighter. Then she saw it. Another door, just behind the coat rack. Too narrow. Too crooked. It hadn't been there a moment ago. She stepped toward it, and the house groaned, not in protest, but pleasure. The door swung open, and beyond it, rooms, hallways, impossible corridors leading into places she didn't recognize, yet knew deeply. A bedroom that looked like her childhood home, a bathroom from her ex-husband's apartment, a nursery that should have never existed. The hollow had been listening, learning, building from her. Each memory turned into architecture, each regret a window, each loss a stair. And it had been watching long before Birchfield, long before Maya. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It had become a body, an Iva. She was in its heart. Behind her, the door slammed shut, the lights flickered, and somewhere in the shifting maze of walls and floors, something began to hum, a woman's voice. Sweet, familiar, a lullaby, the one Ava's mother used to sing, only this time the lyrics were different, and they ended with her name. Ava didn't run. She didn't even flinch when the door slammed shut behind her. There was no point. She was inside now. Not just inside a house, but inside her. The hollow had peeled back its foul aid. No more lures, no more bait. It had evolved, shifted from the old teeth, and thread horror into something slicker, smarter, closer to Ava's pulse. It didn't build rooms anymore. It built memories, and it used hers like bricks. The hallway ahead pulsed with a low, reddish glow that didn't come from any source she could see. It came from beneath the walls, a kind of blood, light that seeped through the wood like it was skin stretched over a body too large to stay hidden. The humming continued, a gentle thread of song wrapping around her spine like fingers pressed along a piano. Ava walked slowly toward it, gripping the faded blue dress in her fist. As she passed the first door on her left, she stopped. It had her old childhood bedroom number etched into it. 12. A detail too specific to be coincidence. She opened it. Inside was the room she hadn't seen in 2 decades. Posters of wolves and stars still clung to the walls, and her twin bed sagged under the weight of time that shouldn't exist here. But everything was perfect, frozen in a year long dead. Even the faint smell of cherry lip balm lingered in the air. Iva stepped forward, unsure if her feet were touching the floor or something pretending to be floor. Her fingers hovered over her old bookshelf. Goosebumps, Fear Street. A handful of battered journals. One was missing. Her third journal, 8th grade, charcoal cover, the one she'd burned after the incident. The one no one else knew about. She backed out of the room quickly, slamming the door shut. The hallway groaned, pleased. Every room would be like that, a trap made of her. She moved faster now, passing doors that bore dates instead of numbers. 2004, 2009, 2017, milestones, failures, moments she'd tried to forget. She paused in front of the one marked 2012, her divorce. Ava didn't open it. She just stood there, breathing through her teeth as the humming grew louder. The air in the hallway grew hot, not from heat, but from memory. It swelled around her like humidity, pressing into her ears, her eyes. The house was trying to drown her in herself. She reached a corner, turned, and found the nursery. Her knees buckled. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. But the mobile above the crib spun slowly, casting shadows of stars and moons on the ceiling. A blanket lay folded over the rail, yellow, embroidered with the name Mia. Ava staggered into the room, hands trembling. Mia never had a nursery like this. They'd been living with her sister back then, scraping by, barely enough space to breathe. But this room, this was the one Ava had planned, the one she had dreamed of before everything fell apart. The hollow hadn't just stolen her past, it had taken her wishes. Suddenly, a sharp pain pulsed in her temple, and she stumbled back. A low groan filled the room, not human, not mechanical, like 1,000 whispers being crushed under the weight of breath. The crib moved, not slid, shifted, as if the room adjusted its design mid-thought. Inside the crib now was something wrapped in the yellow blanket, a lump, twitching beneath the folds. Ava didn't want to lift it, but her hands did. Fingers unwrapping the blanket one fold at a time, slower, until she saw it, a bundle of red thread, knotted into the shape of a child, limbs bent wrong, a face sewn shut, but it moved, twitched, like it was trying to become something. She dropped it. The moment it hit the crib mattress, it split open, and from inside spilled teeth. Hundreds. Baby teeth, tiny and perfect, they clattered like hail. Ava stumbled back, heart hammering, throat tight. She turned and fled the room, the hallway darkening behind her as the lights began to blink. One by one, shuddering her way out like an eyelid closing. The humming became a voice now, and it came from the walls. I built this for you, Ava. It wasn't the woman in black. Not exactly. The voice was her shape, but not her tone. This one was loving, gentle, familiar. It sounded like her mother. Ava spun around, backing down the hall. You wanted a place to rest, the voice continued. To stop running, to stop hurting. I listened. A door behind her opened. She turned, a dining room. Birch fields exactly as it had been. Set for 2. Candles lit. A chair pulled out just for her. Mia sat at the table, smiling. But it wasn't Mia. Not fully. Her smile was too steady. Her eyes didn't blink. She's waiting, the voice said again. Ava didn't enter. She knew what would happen if she did. She turned and ran. The walls shifted with her steps, growing tighter, narrower. Wood turned to flesh, paint to pulse. Then she reached the door, the original door, the red one. She grabbed the knob and twisted, locked. The humming behind her became a scream, from every room. Dozens of voices, all hers, crying, laughing, pleading. The walls bulged. Something moved behind them, hands pressing against the surface, trying to push through. Ava raised the blue dress in her hand. She didn't know why, but it felt like the only thing she had. She pressed it to the door. The screaming stopped. A moment of silence so complete it made her ears ring. Then, The lock clicked. The door creaked open. Light, blinding, she stepped through, and the house vanished. Gone. No smoke, no collapse, just absence. She stood in a clearing. No street, no buildings. Mia stood beside her, real, awake, watching. "How did you find me?" Ava asked, breathless. Mia looked up. "You gave her a memory she didn't make. It confused her." Ava dropped the dress. Mia took her hand. "She's still building," the girl said. "Just somewhere else." Ava nodded, then turned toward the horizon. Because the hollow was no longer in one place. It was in every forgotten corner, and it remembered her. Ava had walked away from a house that wasn't supposed to disappear. No flames. No crumble. No violent implosion like the death of something ancient and cursed. It had just gone. Like a shadow pulled back into itself. But the ground beneath her feet still felt wrong, like it carried a memory the world wasn't ready to admit. The air in the clearing buzzed faintly. Not with sound, but with pressure, like there were still whispers pressing against her eardrums that she couldn't quite hear. Mia stood beside her, staring down at the empty patch where the red door had once stood. She didn't speak. She didn't blink. It wasn't fear in her face anymore. It was recognition. A slow understanding of what they were really up against. The hollow hadn't built just one house. It didn't even need walls anymore. It could build in people, in objects, in stories told the wrong way at the wrong time. It could ride memory like a current, spreading from dream to dream, from one unfinished thought to the next. Ava had broken one nest, but now she was certain there were more, and maybe worse, others were learning how to build them. Back in town, things had changed. Subtly. The gas station was closed. Windows darkened by newspaper that hadn't been there before. A dog Ava had seen every morning, tied outside the hardware store, was now gone, its leash flapping against a post in the wind. The woman at the diner who once greeted them with a tired but friendly smile didn't make eye contact, didn't speak. She just stared at Ava's hands, as if waiting for them to start bleeding. Whatever the hollow was, it hadn't retreated. It had recoiled. It was regrouping, maybe even watching through new eyes. Ava and Mia packed quickly. Another town, another motel. Another name scratched hastily into a logbook with cash paid up front. Ava couldn't afford to build roots anymore. Roots meant a place to dig, and the hollow knew how to dig deep. 3 nights later, they stopped in a place called Darren Falls. A town that looked like it'd been dipped in amber 30 years ago and never thawed out. The people were friendly. Too friendly. A man offered to carry their bags from the car, even though Ava had refused 3 times. The motel receptionist handed Mia a lollipop without asking first. The woman at the bookstore asked if they were new to town, and when Ava said no, the woman smiled and said, "You will be." It wasn't until they found the flyer that Ava realized what was happening. It was posted to a corkboard in the lobby of the local library, hidden between advertisements for piano lessons and antique auctions. Neighborhood open house. Come meet your new neighbors. Saturday, 6 p.m., 14th Merrow Lane. The image was printed in soft pastels, cheerful and innocuous. But the house in the picture, Ava felt her stomach drop. It was close, not Birchfield, not exact, but close enough that her skin went cold. She pulled the flyer down and turned it over. Nothing on the back, but the paper was too thick, too layered. She peeled at one corner carefully, and something pulled away. A second flyer, almost invisible beneath the top layer. Printed in faded ink, more fragile, the kind of paper used in basements and church storage rooms decades ago. This one was different. If you have seen her, do not speak. Do not answer the door. Do not dream in the same bed twice. She listens through the walls of memory. At the bottom, scrawled in jagged, almost childish handwriting, she is building again. You brought her with you. Ava folded the flyer and left the library without a word. Mia followed without asking. They drove to Merrow Lane that afternoon, just as the sky began to purple with that early evening hush. The house was already standing, finished. A full two-story Victorian with an iron fence and a porch swing that moved in rhythm with the wind. Or something close to it. No cars in the driveway. No signs of activity, but the front door was wide open, not inviting, expectant, waiting. Ava didn't step out of the car, she just stared. "They're not building them anymore," she said. "They're planting them." Mia nodded. "And someone's helping." That was the part Ava hadn't let herself consider until now. That there were others. Not victims, not haunted residents, but assistants. People who had seen the hollow, felt its breath on their thoughts, and chose to let it in. Like it offered something in return. Safety. Power. Or maybe just a place to hide from pain. She looked at the house and saw how perfect it was. Too symmetrical. Too clean. The curtains swayed even though the windows were closed. "Do you hear it?" she asked Mia. "No," the girl said. "But it hears you." That night, they didn't sleep. Ava stayed up writing again. New entries, new pages, more warnings. She changed the tone. Less poetic, more direct. If the house appears before you see a moving truck, walk away. If the floor creaks in places you've never stepped, leave. If your child starts humming a tune you've never taught them, run. Do not speak her name. Do not listen for her voice. That's how she begins. She started mailing the pages again. P.O. boxes in neighboring counties. Scattered drops of truth that might find their way into someone's mailbox before the hollow found their walls. But it was harder now. The thread was growing clever. She woke one morning to find someone had slipped a page under her motel door. One of her own flyers. But the message had changed. Her words were crossed out, replaced with a single sentence, written in delicate, looping cursive. "You don't warn people out of kindness. You do it to delay the inevitable." Ava crumpled the paper, but she didn't throw it away. She kept it, because it meant someone had found her. Not the hollow. Someone working for it. She was being watched. Not just by mirrors and walls now. By eyes. People. And she didn't know who. That night, she found a photograph in her glove compartment. One she hadn't placed there. A black and white image of a woman standing in front of Birchfield. But the date on the back read 1947. And the woman was Ava. Her face, her eyes, her smile. She had never been there. But she had. Because the hollow was done following timelines. It was digging through the past now. Through every version of her. And it wasn't just feeding on her memory. It was feeding on herself. Ava stared at the photograph until her fingers went numb. Her face, her exact face, frozen in grainy black and white, standing before a version of Birchfield that hadn't yet sagged under time. The porch was straight, the wood fresh, and she was smiling. Not politely, not nervously. She was happy. That was the part Ava couldn't make sense of. The warmth in her eyes, the way she leaned slightly toward the front door, as though she were stepping inside willingly. Her thumb trembled over the name scrawled on the back, Evelyn Monroe, 1947. She had no Evelyn in her family tree. None that she could remember. But the hollow didn't care about bloodlines. It had never needed a lineage. It only needed a story. And if it wanted her remembered by another name, another life, it would write her into the past without hesitation. That's what it did. It rewrote. History, memory, identity, until all that was left was the version it could use. She stuffed the photo into the glove compartment and slammed it shut. But the feeling stayed with her. A splinter. She could feel herself fracturing under it. If she wasn't Iva anymore. If the hollow had started rewriting her story. How long would it take before she started believing it? Maya didn't mention the photo. She hadn't seen it. But she didn't need to. That night, she sat on the edge of the motel bed and said, "It's happening faster." Ava didn't ask what she meant. She already knew. They were no longer outrunning the hollow. It was cutting them off. Dropping seeds along the roads they hadn't yet traveled. Building houses in towns they didn't know existed. She was starting to feel it even in the air. How certain streets curved wrong. How strangers' faces blurred just slightly in her memory the moment she looked away. And then the letters started arriving. The first was tucked under the windshield wiper. A plain envelope, no stamp, no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, typed, formal. You are invited to the Hollow homecoming. Attendance is not optional. The second came 2 days later. Slipped under their door while they slept. Your place has already been prepared. The third was different. It was handwritten, and it knew things. Dear Ava, it's almost time. You've warned enough. You've fought long enough. The others are ready. Some have already opened their doors. Some have already stitched their mouths. You are not alone, but you are surrounded. When you dream again, dream carefully. She's been practicing your voice. At the bottom, a signature. No name, just a symbol, a thread curling into a spiral, a mouth, a needle. Ava burned the letters, but the ashes smelled sweet, like sugar cane and mildew. The Hollow's scent, familiar now. 2 towns later, she noticed changes in Mia. The girl would stop mid-sentence and tilt her head, like she was listening to something Ava couldn't hear. She'd blink slowly and murmur, "That's not her voice," then snap out of it with no memory of what she'd said. At night, she talked in her sleep. Not words, names. Places Ava had never been, or hadn't yet. One night, Mia woke with blood trickling from her nose. There was a room, she said, voice tight with panic, and I wasn't supposed to see it. Ava tried to calm her. What was in the room? Maya's eyes welled. You, but older. And your mouth was sewn shut. And when I called for you, you turned. And you didn't have eyes. Ava didn't sleep that night. She knew what the Hollow was doing. It was building versions of her. Ones that would answer the door when she finally collapsed. Ones that would tell Mia, it's safe now. Come inside. They needed help, but there was no one to ask. Or so Ava thought. Until she returned to the library in Durham Falls and found a page tucked between books on occult architecture. Handwritten in red ink. You're not the first, and beneath that, meet me where the house first failed. No name, no address. But Ava understood. She knew what it meant. Birchfield, the real one, the first one, the original wound. They went back, against every instinct, every survival scream. Ava packed what little they had and returned to the place where it had all begun. Not because she wanted to, because she had to. If she didn't find the others, if she didn't uncover who, or what, was trying to stop this thing from growing further, she would lose. Not to death, to replacement. The Hollow didn't kill, it rewrote. It built better versions of you until no one remembered the difference. Birchfield stood just as she had left it, but something had changed. It was decaying faster. Wood that had once pulsed with breath now sagged inward. The front porch had collapsed. The red door hung on one hinge, groaning in the breeze. It looked abandoned, defeated. But Ava knew better. It was bait. They stepped inside, and the house inhaled. Just once. A long, deep breath that pulled the air tight around them. Every board settled, every mirror fogged. Then a voice whispered. Not the woman in black, not her mother, not Maya, her own voice, calling from upstairs. Ava Maya clutched her hand. Don't follow it, I won't. But they both knew that was a lie, because the Hollow never called you by name unless it had a new room waiting. A room with your face, and a mouth just like yours, ready to speak the words that would undo you. The stairs groaned beneath Ava's feet like old bones straining to carry memory. The house seemed smaller than before, but deeper somehow. The hallway stretched longer than it ever had, and the walls were bowed inward. Not from age, but from something pressing out, as if the Hollow had filled itself too tightly with borrowed faces and old voices, and now couldn't quite contain its own skin. Behind her, Maya stood still on the first step, eyes fixed on the ceiling. She wasn't coming up, and Ava hadn't asked her to. She knew better. Mia was a compass. If she moved, it was because something inside her shifted first. And right now, that inner needle pointed down, not up. The voice came again as Ava reached the top. Ava soft, gentle. Her exact tone, her exact inflection. She turned left toward the master bedroom. The door was closed, but light leaked from the bottom, a flickering gold that pulsed like candlelight. Ava's breath hitched. She reached for the doorknob, hand trembling, but before she touched it, she saw something scratched into the wood, just above the knob. Why you aren't the fars t? The same message she'd seen in the library, same handwriting, same deep, almost carved pressure. She opened the door. Inside was her, sitting on the edge of the bed, same clothes, same face, same hands folded neatly in her lap. But her eyes were wrong. They shimmered like liquid. No iris, no white, just solid black, as if someone had replaced them with mirrors that reflected only hunger. I've been waiting, it said. Ava didn't move. What are you? The thing smiled. It didn't blink. I'm what you leave behind when you survive too long. I'm the version that didn't escape. The one who stayed and fed the house until it remembered how to live. Ava's stomach turned. You're not me. But I was, for a while, until the hollow peeled the fear off and stitched something better underneath. I'm the Ava who doesn't run. The one who said yes. It stood, moved with her gait, her posture, every motion perfect. I can make it stop, it said. The running, the guilt, the weight. You've carried too much for too long, and now your name is stretched too thin. Let me take it. Let me wear it. Ava stepped back. The room behind her had changed. The hallway was gone. Now it was a nursery, not Maya's, not hers, but one built of fragments. Her mother's voice humming from the walls, her father's kalang thick in the air, the scent of burned toast from her first apartment. The crib in the center rocked gently empty, and from behind it she stepped out. The woman in black, smiling, watching. You brought her to me, the woman whispered. You walked willingly, and now the house remembers everything. Iva turned, ready to run, but the door was gone. She was inside now, not just the room, the memory. The other Ava, the hollowed Ava, stepped forward, eyes bright with black light. You thought you could write your way out, warn others, send your words like seeds. But every story you told, she raised one hand. Dozens of Ava's flyers floated in the air. I was just an invitation. The woman in black nodded. The moment they read your name, they opened a door. Ava staggered back, her spine hitting the edge of the crib. No, they're building you now, the hollowed Ava whispered. All across the country. Little versions of your fear, your voice, your thread. She reached into her chest, literally, without flinching, and pulled out a long, red cord. It bled. Let me stitch you back in, she said. We'll be one. Just like she planned. But before she could move, the floor beneath them cracked. A sound like wood splintering and crying out. The ceiling above split wide open, and through the crack, Mia dropped, straight down, no fear in her eyes. Just fire. She landed between Ava and her other self, holding a shard of glass. From a mirror. The hollow's kind. Mia. No, Ava shouted. But the girl stepped forward and stabbed the mirror, shard into the hollowed Ava's chest. It didn't bleed. It opened, like a door. The hollow howled. The room warped, walls peeled like skin from rot. The woman in black screamed, not in pain, but in loss. Ava grabbed Maya's hand. They ran, through the rip in the wall, down a hall that hadn't existed seconds ago. Each step collapsed the floor behind them. Rooms caved in. Doors imploded. They weren't escaping the house. They were destroying it. Every memory Ava reclaimed, every version of herself she rejected, collapsed the architecture of the hollow, and then they saw it. A final door. Not red, wood, old, simple, real. They pushed it open and stumbled into moonlight. Real moonlight. Grass beneath their feet. Night air. No breath behind the wind. No threads in the dirt, just quiet. Just sky. The house was gone. This time, completely. And Ava knew. She'd torn out the root. But even as she stood in the silence, Maya looked up at her. She's not dead, the girl whispered. No. Ava agreed. She's waiting for the next version of me to get tired. They didn't speak again. But as they walked away, Ava realized something. She wasn't scared. Not because it was over. Because for the first time, she was ready to go back if she had to. Ready to fight. Not for her name. Not even for Mia. But for every story the Hollow thought it could rewrite. The town they found next didn't have a name. Not one that lasted, anyway. The green highway sign had been painted over so many times it was just a rusted panel flaking against a crooked post. One gas station. One diner. A post office that hadn't been used in months. As Ava drove past the collapsed church at the edge of the main road, she didn't have to ask if the Hollow had touched this place. She could feel it. Not loud. Not obvious. But like a skipped beat in a familiar song. The rhythm of the world had bent here once. Maybe more than once. They stopped at a small motel on the outskirts. A squat little building with 6 rooms and a flickering neon sign that just read OTL. The front desk clerk didn't ask questions. He handed Ava the key with a glance that lasted a second too long, like he almost remembered her, or wanted to. Inside the room, the wallpaper curled at the edges. The air smelled like damp carpet and bleach. But it was quiet, for now. Mia didn't speak. She hadn't said a word since they left Birchfield behind. Ava let her rest. She needed time to settle again, to untangle the pieces that place had tried to stitch back into her. But Ava didn't rest. She sat at the small desk near the window and opened her notebook. The pen felt heavier than usual. The stories were changing. It wasn't just Ava's memories the Hollow had learned to echo. It had started shaping entire towns. Ghost suburbs. Half-built developments that weren't on any map. Places no one remembered visiting, but somehow had. Places people woke up in with no idea how they'd gotten there. She'd met a man in a rest stop once who said he'd been living in the same house for 40 years, only to find out the building had been demolished in 1992. When she showed him a photo of Birchfield, he collapsed in sobs. Said it looked like his childhood home, but cleaner. Sharper. Like it had been made from the memory instead of the place. Ava had a map now, hand-drawn, covered in pinholes and scribbles. Every town she visited, she added something new. A symbol, a date, a name. Some of the names weren't even hers. Names whispered by strangers who recognized her. Names Mia mumbled in her sleep. The Hollow was growing sideways. Not like a tree, like a fungus. Spreading underground through rootless memory, popping up in the cracks of places no one thought to look. That night, Ava found another flyer, taped to their motel room door. No footsteps. No sound. Just there. Wios RVI'd bitisach leftitiedi door. Open. She didn't open the door. She didn't need to. The room itself had changed. The mirror on the far wall was different. Too clean. Too tall. And Ava could feel the air thicken around it. Maya sat up in bed and spoke her first words in days. She's testing us. Ava walked to the mirror, watched herself breathe. Something was off. Her reflection blinked too late. Her posture was perfect. Too perfect. She raised her right hand. The reflection did the same. But a split second too early. That was the trick. The Hollow never mirrored you. It predicted you. She leaned close and whispered, "Not this time," and turned her back to it. The reflection didn't move. It just watched. Ava opened her notebook again and wrote one line across a new page. When the mirror moves first, don't follow it. They stayed in that room for one night. At dawn, Ava found her reflection asleep in the glass. Head tilted, mouth slightly open. As if dreaming someone else's life, she smashed the mirror. No blood, but a sound escaped. Not a scream, not a cry, a laugh. High. Delicate. Familiar. Hers. Ava turned to Mia. It's not just building rooms anymore. It's building versions. Mia nodded slowly. She wants someone people will listen to. That chilled Ava more than anything. The Hollow didn't just want to replace her. It wanted to be her. With every warning Ava spread, with every flyer she left behind, with every person she tried to save, she had carved out a shape for the Hollow to fill. A ghost wearing her intentions. A mask of help stretched over hunger, and people were starting to believe it. 2 towns over, a woman thanked Ava for the safe house she had built. Ava had never been there. 3 days later, that woman disappeared, left only a drawing on her kitchen wall, a red door, a mouth beneath it, and a note she said you'd visit soon. Ava realized the hollow wasn't chasing her anymore. It was shadowing her. Every place she went, it went to, but not to destroy, to mimic. It was laying the groundwork for something bigger, a structure of belief. A place that didn't need walls or mirrors or thread anymore. Just stories. She thought about the first flyer she'd ever written. The first warning she left under a stranger's door. Had that been her? Was it possible it had never been only her? Was the hollow already part of her fingers then, gently guiding the pen, slipping just one extra word into the page? Her breath caught. She opened her notebook. Checked the very first copy she'd kept. The opening line was supposed to read, "Do not enter this house." But this one said, "Do not enter this house alone." The word alone was written in a different hand. Almost hers. Almost. She felt the air around her shift. She turned. The motel door was open. Just a crack, and down the hallway she heard it. Not footsteps. Not knocking. A sound much softer, much more familiar. A pen. Scratching on paper. Her words being rewritten. It was faint, that sound, like a whisper on paper. A slow scraping loop. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. Ava stood frozen, the motel room around her suddenly too quiet, too still, as if the entire building had stopped breathing, just to let that sound echo louder. The hallway stretched out beyond the cracked open door, dimly lit by flickering fluorescent tubes that buzzed faintly overhead. She stepped toward it, pulse hard in her throat, her bare feet touching the cold tile like it might ripple beneath her. Maya stirred behind her. Don't go. But Ava had to. Because that wasn't just the sound of writing, it was her writing. She knew the rhythm. The pause she always made after the first line. The way she sometimes pressed too hard when she was angry or scared. That sound wasn't being imitated. It was being replicated. Perfectly. The hallway outside was empty, but the sound came from room 6 at the far end. A door she hadn't noticed before. There was no key for it at the front desk. No one had checked in there. And yet light leaked from beneath the door. A soft orange flicker, like candlelight swaying against old wallpaper. She approached slowly, holding her breath. The sound didn't stop. The writing continued. Patient and deliberate, as though someone was recording her thoughts as she thought them. She touched the doorknob. It turned without resistance. Inside, the room was dark except for a single desk lamp. The rest of the space had been stripped bare. No bed, no curtains, no furniture, just walls layered in her pages, her flyers, pinned and taped and glued to every surface. Hundreds of them, each with different warnings. Some she recognized, others she didn't remember ever writing. But they were hers. Her handwriting, her phrasing, her signature. At the desk sat a figure. Ava, again. But this one was older. Her face lined with years she hadn't yet lived, eyes hollowed by too much knowing. Her hands moved across the page steadily, as if she had all the time in the world. She didn't look up. Ava's voice came from her lips, but not to greet, not to warn. She was repeating something. Over and over, do not follow the thread. Do not enter the door. Do not speak your name. Do not follow the thread. Each repetition bled a little more urgency. A little more panic. Ava stepped closer. Who are you? The woman's hand stopped. Pen mid-sentence. She lifted her head and smiled. I'm the last one they couldn't rewrite. Ava swallowed hard. You mean? I mean the hollow doesn't just build you. It replaces you over time. Every time you speak, it memorizes. Every time you warn, it learns. And eventually, it finds the version of you that's most useful. Not strongest. Not smartest, just the one people believe the most. She gestured to the walls. These are all versions, not warnings. Scripts, each one a slightly different you. Some soft-spoken, some angry, some already dead. The hollow has been testing audiences. Ava felt her knees buckle. She leaned on the doorframe, heart pounding. What does it want? The older Ava tilted her head. A legacy, not just a house, a myth. A name that spreads itself. And when people speak that name, they call her in. Your name. Our name. Ava stepped forward. Then how do we stop it? The woman looked down. That's the thing. You can't erase a myth, but you can ruin it. She slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. Ava picked it up. It was blank. Start telling it wrong, she whispered. Every version. Twist it. Break the rhythm. Mangle the warnings. Make the myth unusable. Fill it with lies until the hollow doesn't know what's real anymore. Then maybe, just maybe, it'll collapse under the weight of confusion. Ava's eyes met hers. But if I do that, people could die. People are already dying, the older Ava said. But if you don't act now, they'll start believing the hollow is you. And then they'll invite it in. Suddenly, the light above them flickered. The room changed. The walls breathed. The flyers began to curl, the ink bleeding, letters twisting into strange runes. She's listening, the older Ava said, a voice shaking. She knows we're together. That's not supposed to happen. The floor cracked. The desk splintered. The woman screamed. And in the blink of an eye, she was gone. So was the room. Ava stood alone in an alley behind the motel, holding a piece of paper soaked in something dark. The only words still legible tell the story wrong. Break the myth. Confuse the thread. She looked up. Maya was standing at the end of the alley, barefoot, pale, eyes wide. She tried to talk to me, the girl whispered. She had your face. Ava walked toward her. Did you answer? Mia shook her head. No, but I think she smiled when I didn't. They went back inside. Locked the door. That night, Ava rewrote every flyer. She changed names, changed dates, gave the wrong address, switched the door color, made up rules that didn't exist, and she spread them. Left them under windshields, in bathroom stalls, in old books and laundromats, misinformation as defense. If the hollow needed precision to enter, Ava would give it chaos. But deep down, she feared what might happen when someone found one of those lies and knocked anyway. Because even a wrong story told enough times becomes true. There's something strange about a lie told with enough certainty. It doesn't just disguise the truth, it replaces it. Ava realized this when the first call came. A payphone. Static, heavy. 3 a.m. The voice on the other end was calm, measured, and utterly unfamiliar. But it spoke to her like an old friend. You said we had to leave the window open. You said that's how she leaves. Ava froze, every nerve in her body locking into place. I didn't write that. But your name was on it, the voice said. And now something's in the walls. Click. The line went dead. That was the first consequence. A story she'd written deliberately wrong, distorted to scatter the hollow's blueprint, had found someone too desperate not to believe. Ava had changed the rules to protect strangers. But some of them had followed those rules. They'd left the windows open. They'd hummed the lullaby backward. They'd whispered her name 3 times before bed, and the hollow had walked right in. Ava sat alone in the motel bathroom, knees drawn to her chest, watching the steam from the faucet curl into the air like it meant something. Mia slept in the next room. Clutching a stuffed rabbit Ava didn't remember her owning. Another glitch. Another twist in the thread. She used to keep track of these details. Kept notebooks full of what was hers and what wasn't. But even that had started to blur. The hollow didn't need to knock anymore. It just rearranged. Ava wasn't sure when she first noticed the girl's voice change. Not dramatically. Not enough to say anything out loud. But there were moments, small ones, when Mia used words she'd never used before. When she laughed too softly, or didn't laugh at all when she should have. When her drawings showed doors they hadn't seen yet. Ava had once asked her why she always drew staircases. To remind me where not to go, Maya had answered without looking up. The next morning, the front desk clerk was gone. The entire lobby abandoned. A plate of toast left on the counter, still warm. No sign of a struggle. Just vacancy. Like the person had stepped out of themselves and vanished cleanly, with no mess. Maya picked up the plate and turned it in her hands. She's testing what happens when no one says goodbye. That night, Ava dreamed of the red door again. But not as it was. It was wooden this time. Cracked. Hanging open at the top of a staircase she didn't recognize. A hallway stretched behind it, lined with mirrors that each reflected a different moment of her life. But none of them moved when she did. In the dream, someone called her name from inside the hallway. She didn't answer. She woke with blood on her hands. Not hers. And when she checked the mirror above the sink, her reflection was writing something across the glass. Words she didn't know yet, but they were hers. A new flyer. New instructions. Mia was awake when she stepped out of the bathroom, sitting cross-legged on the bed, watching the door. She's getting smarter, Mia said quietly. Ava nodded. She's using expectation now, the girl added. Not fear, not pressure, just belief. It clicked in Ava's chest like a lock turning. That's what the hollow had been waiting for all along. Not pain, not tragedy, just belief. Stories needed believers. The hollow was never just about houses. It was about people. About the way people needed answers. Needed to explain the scratches on the wall, the voice in the attic, the shape at the end of the hall that wasn't there when they looked twice. People didn't just let the hollow in. They built it themselves, with every whisper passed over coffee, every urban legend shared around a fire, every warning flyer handed from trembling hand to trembling hand. She thought she was saving people. She was spreading it. Mia stood slowly and went to the nightstand, pulling something from the drawer. A stack of flyers, not Ava's handwriting. Newer, sharper, the font perfect, mass-produced, hundreds of copies, each with a small, clean red door printed at the bottom, and the words she helps, she heals, she hears. There was a website listed. Ava's name at the bottom. She dropped the papers. It was happening faster now, out of her control. They were building an organization around her warnings. A following. The hollow hadn't just mimicked her. It had marketed her. She left the motel that night without checking out. Without looking back. They drove for hours. Through small towns. Long empty stretches of road where radio signals fuzzed out and the stars grew too close. But everywhere they stopped, every diner, every bulletin board, every rest area bathroom, her name was there, not scribbled, printed. Flyers, brochures, pamphlets, like a religion. Mia said, "At best you've become a lighthouse." And they forgot lighthouses don't protect people. They just warn them before the rocks. And even that, now, wasn't true anymore. Ava pulled the car over just before dawn, hands gripping the wheel like it might vanish under her. The sky was turning the pale gray of memory. Her reflection in the rearview mirror was smiling. She wasn't. "I can't fix it," Ava whispered. Mia looked at her, eyes soft. "You can confuse it." "How?" Mia handed her a pen. "Tell a story so wrong it collapses. Tell it so badly, the myth eats itself." Ava opened a fresh page in her notebook. And she began. Once, there was no door. Only the idea of one. And when someone believed in it hard enough, it built itself, brick by lie. Inside was not a woman, but a child. Not a whisper, but a song. And the walls never bled. They sang back. As the sun rose, Ava wrote the story that would break the hollow. Or become its final chapter. By the time Ava filled the 4th page of the false story, the air had shifted. It wasn't just the dawn light brushing across the horizon. It was the pressure. The sensation that something old and vast had turned its head toward her. It didn't roar. It didn't scream. It noticed. And that was somehow worse. A force that immense, that quiet, had no need for violence. It just waited, patient, watching her undo the blueprint it had spent decades refining. Maya watched her write without speaking. She seemed smaller now, not in fear, but in restraint. like she knew her words might become too loud if she said them aloud. Ava could feel it too, that tension, that hush before a second heartbeat starts. The world around them remained still. No cars passed, no birds called. Even the wind seemed to avoid their patch of roadside, wary of crossing into whatever space Ava was rewriting. The new story, her lie, grew stranger with each sentence. She gave the hollow a different name, not she, not mother, not even thread. Ava called it Aaron, a name so plain it stripped the myth of its power. Aaron was not a presence, but a rumor about a rumor. In the story, Aaron's door was made of glass and couldn't be knocked on, only looked through. The house had no walls, only hallways that circled back on themselves until the person walking them forgot where they began. And worst of all, Ava described Aaron not as dangerous but boring. Forgotten. A story you told your cousin at summer camp, only to realize halfway through that even you didn't believe it. Every word she wrote made the myth weaker. It was unraveling the hollow's rhythm, the way a song breaks when the wrong note keeps echoing through its chorus. Ava even changed the rules. She said the house welcomed fire, that the mirrors didn't reflect but projected, that if you whispered her name 3 times, all that happened was a knock that never stopped. Useless, unthreatening, lonely, she rewrote herself too. Ava became a fictional author, a woman who lived in the attic of an imaginary library. Terrified of her own handwriting, she claimed she never wrote warnings, only riddles, and that the flyers were misprints. That nothing in them was real, that the red door was a joke played by bored teenagers in a town that didn't exist. And then, in bold, the house is only as real as you are afraid of it. Stop fearing. It stops following. By the time she reached the end, the sun had fully risen. The temperature hadn't changed, but Ava was sweating. The paper shook in her hands, not from nerves, but from the impossible weight of being noticed by something that lived in thoughts, that breathed through beliefs. She had written a poison for the hollow, and now it was deciding whether to swallow it or spit her out. Behind her, the road stretched in both directions, empty and silent. But then, far in the distance, a single figure appeared, walking slowly, deliberately, dressed in black. Not the same woman from the Birchfield house. This one was younger, taller. Hair in a tight braid, she wore no shoes. Her feet bled with each step, but she didn't flinch, and in her hands, she carried something Ava recognized immediately, a notebook. Just like hers. Maya stood up, stepping protectively between Ava and the figure. Is it her? Ava shook her head, unsure. No, not quite, but close. The woman in black stopped 20 feet away, then sat cross-legged in the middle of the road. She didn't speak. She just opened her notebook and began to write. Mia whispered, "She's writing you." Ava stepped forward slowly, or rewriting. The air between them felt thick, electric. 2 authors telling competing versions of the same myth. The ground didn't tremble. The sky didn't darken. But something inside Ava's memory shifted. She suddenly couldn't recall what her father's voice sounded like. Her childhood bedroom blurred in her mind, like someone had painted over it in watercolors. The hollow wasn't coming through walls anymore. It was coming through edits. The woman in black wrote faster, and Ava felt the tug, a slow unraveling of her name. Her hands ached. Her reflection in the car window no longer matched. And when she blinked, she saw threads dancing in the corners of her vision, curling toward her skin like ivy. Mia reached into her pocket and pulled out a lighter. Ava didn't ask where she got it. She just nodded. They couldn't fight the hollow with truth anymore. Truth had become a weapon it turned against them. But a lie burned. Ava knelt, placed her rewritten story on the asphalt, and struck the flame. The paper curled, blackened. Ash scattered on the breeze. The woman in black paused, her pen hovering over the page. Then, slowly, her body began to smoke, not from heat, but from conflict. The version she'd written was being challenged by too many wrong pieces, too many fractured tales. The myth no longer held. It tore at itself like a thread pulled in opposite directions. She looked up at Ava, and for the first time, she winced. Ava met her eyes, and smiled. "You don't get to finish the story." The woman opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Her notebook crumbled in her lap. She turned to ash, piece by piece, until the wind claimed her entirely. Then silence. But not peace. Because in the distance, just behind the trees, more figures waited. Dozens. All with notebooks. All with red doors stitched onto their jackets. The hollow wasn't one thing anymore. It was legion. But now, so was Ava. She looked at Mia. "We write louder." Mia nodded, and together they began the next page. It began with a whisper in the static, a low hum on the radio as they crossed state lines, something beneath the music, like breath caught between frequencies. Ava didn't flinch anymore. She just turned the dial until the voices faded, rolled the windows down, and let the wind speak instead. They'd passed through 3 towns in 2 days, and each one was worse than the last. Not because they were haunted or dangerous. Not in the obvious way. They were believing. The people weren't afraid of the hollow anymore. They were worshipping it. The first town had built a memorial where a house used to be. Flowers placed in front of an empty lot. Handwritten signs thanking her for taking the pain, for listening. A mural stretched across the bricks of a closed-down factory, a red door wide open, with a silhouette smiling behind it, Ava's face, but not Ava's eyes. The second town had children humming the tune Ava heard in her dreams. The melody that used to haunt her was now a schoolyard game. They called it thread tag. One kid wore a blindfold and whispered names. The others had to stay silent or get stitched. The rules didn't make sense, but the children followed them anyway. And the third town, Ava wouldn't speak of it. She and Mia drove through without stopping. Every window in that place was painted over in black. Not boarded, not broken, painted. As if the people inside had decided light was the lie and darkness the only safe truth. They stopped that night in a gas station diner just before the border to another nameless town. The waitress didn't blink when she saw Ava. She simply placed a cup of black coffee on the table and said, "You're later than we expected." Ava didn't answer. She didn't need to. The woman reached into her apron, pulled out a folded page, and slid it across the table. A flyer, clean, crisp. Not Ava's font, not her layout, but her name at the bottom, bold as ever, and the words, "She's the door. Let her open." Mia reached for it, but Ava snatched it first. She read every word. The flyer told people to invite the fear, to accept the reflection, to answer the knock. Every rule Ava had ever written was flipped, corrupted, weaponized. "This is what they've done," Ava whispered. "They're not just mimicking now. They're rebranding." The waitress nodded slowly, almost apologetically. "They say she came from a wound, that she grew in silence, but feeds on voice. They say if we don't listen, she makes us listen." Ava folded the paper. "Who told you that?" The woman blinked once. "You did," and walked away. Ava sat there long after the coffee went cold, the flyer folded tightly in her palm like a curse she couldn't drop. The hollow had won something, something bigger than any house or mirror or thread. It had won trust. The myth no longer needed a building to live in. It lived in words, in flyers, in people's willingness to be afraid together. "They don't fear you anymore," Mia said softly. "They follow you." Ava stared out the window. Her own reflection stared back. This one didn't smile. It waited. They drove again that night, through back roads, through dark curves that bent like questions never meant to be answered. They didn't stop until the headlights caught the sign. Just a piece of wood nailed into a tree, painted red. No words. But Ava knew what it meant. A gathering. They parked in the trees and approached on foot. Dozens of people stood in a field. Men, women, children, some in robes, others in street clothes, all silent. In the center a platform, and on it, a woman with a notebook. She wore Ava's face, her gestures, her posture. But the eyes were wrong, hollowed, too still. Ava gripped Maya's hand. That's not me. I know. The woman began to speak, her voice amplified not by microphone, but by belief. Every ear in the field strained to hear. Every breath waited. We were afraid once. We believed we had to run, that we had to resist. But the truth is, fear feeds her. Resistance feeds her. What she wants is acceptance, and through acceptance, she brings peace. The crowd nodded as one. Ava stepped forward. That's a lie. Every head turned. Mia didn't move. She stayed just behind Ava, still and small and watching. The woman on the platform smiled. Ava Monroe, she said. The first voice. The broken record. Still clinging to the old story. I'm the real story, Ava called out. And you've twisted it. The woman didn't flinch. And yet, here they stand. Listening. Believing. You made them ready. I only gave them permission. Ava stepped onto the platform. The silence broke. Not in screams or shouts. In mirrors. All around the field. People lifted small hand mirrors from their pockets, from their jackets, from beneath their sleeves. And the reflections. All of them were Ava. Different versions. 1,000 paths she might have taken. Some with eyes stitched. Some bleeding from the mouth. Some smiling too wide. Some with no mouth at all. She turned to the crowd. You think you're safe because you were told to invite her in. But all you've done is surrender your name. You're not protected. You're overwritten. No one moved. But one child dropped their mirror. It shattered. The woman on the platform hissed. Mia caught it before anyone else. That's it, she whispered. The mirrors hold the versions. Break the mirror, break the path. Ava grabbed the mech, not that it was connected, and screamed, "Birar'ia Kieshiem." One person did. Then another. And then 100 more. Cracks exploded through the night like thunder. The hollow roared, not from the field, but from inside every person whose reflection had shattered. The false Ava screamed as her image fractured, her skin splintering like glass under pressure. "You can't erase me," she shrieked. Ava looked into her eyes and said, "No, but I can stop people from reading you." The final mirror cracked, the platform caved, and the field fell silent, not peaceful, not safe, but cleared. Mia stepped beside her. She'll try again. Ava nodded. But now we know how to answer. And somewhere, far beneath the soil, the true hollow pulsed. Still alive, still waiting. But now, it was alone. There was a moment, just after the mirrors shattered. Just before dawn, when everything felt too still. Not the kind of stillness that comes with peace, but the kind that comes right before something wakes up. Ava could feel it in her teeth, in the air. In the hush behind the trees where birds should have been. Something had been ruptured in that field, not just broken but seen, and now the hollow was aware in a new way, not curious, not furious, focused. They left the field in silence. No one followed. No one thanked her. Most didn't even look at her. And Ava realized then, in that narrow, gray space between night and morning, that belief had changed shape. The people hadn't stopped worshiping. They'd just lost their object. And nothing is more dangerous than devotion with nowhere to go. Mia walked a few paces behind, dragging her fingers along the tops of tall grass as if searching for something she'd lost. Ava didn't press. She'd learned by now that Maya's silences meant more than her words. That when the girl was quiet, the world itself seemed to pull tighter, as if listening through her. They returned to the car, which somehow felt smaller than before. Maybe it was the weight of the night still clinging to their clothes. Or maybe it was the knowledge that the hollow didn't need rooms anymore to trap you. It just needed a narrative. One that could loop quietly in your head. One that could rewrite you from the inside. Ava checked the back seat, out of habit now, and paused. There was a flyer lying there. Not printed. Not typed. Handwritten, in her own penmanship. But she hadn't written it. She would have remembered. She always remembered. It read, "When you forget the end, she begins again." The sentence sat like a riddle in her chest, unfolding in layers she couldn't fully catch. She crumpled the page. But even as she tossed it out the window, she could feel it still in her memory, etched into her thoughts like a watermark. They drove west, not because west meant safety, but because it didn't mean anything at all. Every place Ava had known was tainted now, each town a possible echo chamber, each road a repetition of some other road. Even the skies above seemed to curve in unnatural ways, clouds forming shapes that felt almost familiar, like they'd been pulled from dreams she hadn't had yet. In the next town, they found a motel shaped like a horseshoe. 12 rooms, all facing inward. Something about the symmetry made Ava's stomach turn. Mia refused to enter the lobby. "She's watching here," the girl said, eyes darting to the blinking vacancy sign. Not through glass this time, through people. Ava booked the room anyway. Inside, the TV turned on by itself. No signal, just static. But in the static, something moved. Not a face, not a figure. A door, red, flickering. Not there, then closer. Ava unplugged the TV. The screen stayed on. Mia whispered from the bed, "She's trying to remind you." "Of what?" Ava asked. Maya looked at her, eyes tired and impossibly old. "That this isn't your first ending." The words hit Ava like a memory she hadn't earned. Something twisted. Something implied. And in that moment, she remembered the original house. Not the Birchfield replica, not the carbon copies, but the real one. The first time she'd ever seen a red door. She had been 8. It was in her grandmother's basement, behind a shelf full of canned soup and rusted tools. A door no one talked about. A door she was told not to touch. But she had. And when she opened it, she hadn't seen a room or stairs or even darkness. She saw herself, older, bloody, smiling. She never told anyone. She thought she had imagined it. But now, after everything, Ava understood the hollow hadn't followed her. It had started with her. A myth born not from warning, but from curiosity. From one girl's need to know what lay beyond a door no one dared mention. She hadn't written the first flyer out of fear. She had written it because she remembered, and the hollow remembered her too. Maya stood up suddenly. Her shadow was longer than it should have been. "There's one more door," she said. "The real one. Before the house. Before the thread." Ava blinked. "Where?" Mia didn't answer. She just walked to the motel mirror, touched the glass with her palm, and whispered, "Show her what she forgot." The mirror cracked. Not shattered. Not broken, cracked. A single hairline fracture splitting Ava's reflection down the middle. And then, the reflection changed. Not into the hollow. Not into another version of her. It showed a stairwell. Old. Wooden. Familiar. At the bottom was the red door. The first red door. The one that had waited for Ava her whole life. She stepped closer. She reached out. But before she could touch it, the mirror snapped shut. The image gone. Just her face again. Just her. But the message was clear. She couldn't run anymore. Couldn't burn flyers and break mirrors and scatter lies across highways. To end this, she had to go back to the beginning. To the door that started the story. Because the hollow had never needed to chase her. It had been waiting at the end of the path she chose as a child. And now, that door was open again. They didn't speak as they packed. The air had shifted too drastically for words to matter. It felt like being inside a sealed vault that had just let a whisper in. Ava moved methodically. First aid kit, flashlight, 3 flyers with deliberately wrong rules, and the only knife that had ever managed to cut the thread in Birchfield. Mia folded clothes with a stillness that didn't belong to a girl her age. She folded like someone performing a ritual, like every crease was a sentence in a language only the hollow understood. Ava didn't know how she was going to find the first door. She only knew she would. Her memory hadn't been trustworthy for a long time. But some things cut through the smell of damp stone in her grandmother's basement. The way the wooden steps creaked before she stepped on them. The strange sensation that her reflection had beat her there, not followed, arrived ahead of time. as if it had always known she would return. She hadn't thought about that place in years, decades. But now it throbbed in her memory like a wound that had waited patiently to be reopened. They left the motel without paying. There was no clerk anyway. Just a long hallway of doors slightly ajar, and a smell in the air like metal and regret. Ava didn't look back. She drove without checking the map, let her hands steer on memory. Somewhere between instinct and curse, her body remembered the path. Old highways blurred with newer ones. Towns vanished behind fog and sleep. The road became familiar in its wrongness, like déjà vu wearing a new face. The signs along the way were all blank, all but one, an old wooden plank hammered into the ground near a rusted mailbox, tilted sideways, with only 3 words scrawled in thick charcoal, "It's still open." Mia saw it too. She didn't ask what it meant. She knew. They arrived near dusk, just as the sky bruised itself into a fading violet. The house was still there. That stunned Ava more than anything. Her grandmother's place, abandoned since the funeral, boarded up by the bank years ago, now perfectly intact. The paint wasn't peeled. The lawn was short. The porch light was on, flickering like a dying eye. "Do you remember where it is?" Mia asked. Ava nodded once. "Downstairs, behind the shelf." Inside, the house didn't smell like dust. It smelled like waiting. Photos still hung on the walls, though Ava couldn't recall her grandmother ever owning them. Each frame held a different version of Ava, one smiling, one crying, one too blurred to make out. None of them were the one standing in the hallway. It was like the house had tried to remember her and guessed wrong. The basement door was unlocked. Of course it was. The light switch didn't work, but the shadows did. They bent in her favor, curling around corners, just enough to guide her down each stair. And there it was, the shelf with rusted tools and cans with no labels. The old broom handle she used to tap the ceiling with. The threadbare blanket her grandmother claimed was too itchy to throw away. She pulled the shelf aside. The door was still there. Red, no handle, no lock, just a perfect rectangle in the wall, humming with memory. Ava approached slowly. Maya held back. "You don't have to open it. We can walk away." Ava looked back at her. "Yes, I do, because I already did." And then she placed her hand on the door. It swung inward without a sound. Inside there was no room, only time, layers of it. Moments stacked on top of each other, peeling like wallpaper. Ava stepped in and felt her knees buckle, not from pain, but from the sheer weight of memory pressing down from every angle. This wasn't a space built from materials. It was built from choices, from consequences. It showed her every version of herself that had ever touched the hollow's thread. The one who ran, the one who stayed, the one who joined it, the one who became it. Each version stared back at her, not hostile, not sad, just tired. She walked through them. They didn't follow. In the center of the room, or the absence of a room, stood a pedestal. On it a single flyer, blank, waiting. Ava picked up the pen beside it. It burned her fingers. Maya stepped beside her now, though Ava hadn't seen her walk in. She stood calm, eyes gleaming in the strange half-light of the hollow's source. "What are you going to write?" Ava looked down at the paper, then around at the lives she never lived, and said, "The last version, the true one. The lie that ends it all." She began to write, and as she did, the walls of time began to crack, not violently, but with relief, because the story had been looking for its ending, too. And finally, it was being written. The pen moved slower than she wanted it to. Not because her hand trembled, but because the space around her thickened with every word. Ava could feel it pressing in, not like fear, not like pressure, but like something holding its breath. The flyer had no title. That felt right. It didn't need one. It wasn't meant to be passed around, or tacked to a pole, or read out loud in a basement with flickering lights. This one wasn't a warning. It was a recording, a final memory in ink, meant for the thing that had been watching from the beginning. She wrote, "There is no red door." There never was. just the story of one. Mia stood beside her, silent, eyes wide and dry. Ava didn't look at her directly. She couldn't. She was too afraid she might vanish if Ava stared too long, like so many others who'd turned out to be echoes in the hollow's maze. And yet, Maya's presence remained grounded, like an anchor tied to the reality Ava was trying to stitch back together. Each word she wrote dimmed the room around her. The versions of herself that watched from the corners began to blur, their edges fading like smudged charcoal sketches. Some wept, some smiled. Most just stared as their definitions dissolved. Ava had never truly understood what the hollow was, but now she was beginning to grasp what it needed. It didn't just crave belief. It depended on continuity. On stories that kept telling themselves, over and over, unbroken and unchallenged. This flyer was different. It was not a call to action, not a set of instructions or a reversal of old rules. It was the wrong story, told with enough conviction to make the right one buckle. She wrote about a house that blinked out of existence every time someone named it. About mirrors that showed strangers. About whispers that changed pitch if you stopped believing in them. She wrote of a girl named Ava who never opened a door, who turned away, who grew up, who forgot. And then she wrote the most dangerous sentence of all: if you read this, you are already safe. The hollow recoiled. She felt it, like a muscle snapping, like something pulling away from her skin in horror. The walls screamed without sound, vibrating with confusion. It wasn't just the lie that burned. It was the certainty behind it. The way Ava meant it. Because the hollow couldn't grow in lies told for survival. It needed lies that looked like truth. That's what all the flyers had been. That's what made them so powerful. But now the flyer was proud to be false. And that poisoned the myth. The pedestal cracked beneath the weight of her pen's final stroke. The flyer burned not in flame, but in absence. It disintegrated into dust before her eyes, not even smoke rising from it. Just silence, and a sudden cold rush that poured through the space like a dying breath. Then, the door behind them slammed shut. Not with force, with finality. Mia stepped forward. It worked. But Ava didn't answer right away. She was still staring at where the flyer had been. Her hand hovered above the empty pedestal, fingers twitching slightly. "I don't think it's over," she whispered. Maya tilted her head. "Why not?" Ava looked around the room. The other versions of herself were gone. No fading figures. No reflections. Just her and the girl, standing in a quiet that felt too hollow. "Because there's one part I didn't write." "What part?" Ava turned slowly. "The part where I leave." Mia went still, and that's when Ava realized this wasn't Mia. Not anymore. She saw it in the shadow first. Too long, curved wrong. Then in the way her eyes didn't blink. And finally, in her voice when she spoke, soft and strange and too certain, "You were always going to end it. That's why we made you." Ava backed away. The room didn't move with her. It stayed static. "Dead. What are you?" she asked. The girl smiled. Not cruel. Not kind. Just done pretending. "I'm the part that remembers when you forget. I'm what gets left behind when you tell the wrong story." And then the floor cracked beneath her feet. Ava reached for the wall, but there was none. Only falling. She plunged into nothing. No wind. No sense of direction. Just that same sentence echoing through the dark. "If you read this, you are already safe." But she hadn't read it. She'd written it. And that, somehow, made her vulnerable. She hit the ground hard. Not physically, but with the force of awareness. And when she opened her eyes, she was in the Birchfield house again. The one from the beginning. Everything perfectly in place. Every mirror intact. Every thread unmoving. Time reset. As if none of it had ever happened. As if she had never happened. Ava stood slowly. Walked to the window. Outside, the street was quiet, peaceful. And on the sidewalk, a girl stood holding a flyer, reading. Meeting. The real Mia, alive, untouched. And for the first time in a long, long time, Ava smiled. The lie had worked. The hollow had broken. But the cost. No one remembered her now. Not Maya, not the followers, not the towns, not the mirrors. Ava Munro had been edited out of her own myth. She turned from the window and sat in silence, not afraid, not erased, just forgotten. The walls didn't breathe anymore. That was the first thing Ava noticed. There was no pulse in the plaster, no subtle creak of something adjusting behind the scenes, no muffled whispers bleeding through the seams like moisture from a rot you couldn't locate. The Birchfield house stood in a perfect, frozen imitation of what it had once been, a still life of fear, now deprived of its oxygen. The hollow was gone. Banished not through fire or mirrors or blood, but by being overwritten with something louder doubt. And yet, the silence felt like betrayal. Ava sat in what used to be the hallway, the one that led to the red door, though now it opened to a closet filled with dusty linens and nothing else. Her knees were drawn to her chest, arms wrapped tight around them. And for the first time in what felt like years, she cried without urgency. The kind of crying that doesn't come from terror or even grief, but from the slow, unbearable ache of not being needed anymore, of existing just enough to remember who you were and too little for anyone else to care. She had done it. She had killed the myth, but it had cost her her place in it. She had become a name scratched out of the final draft. Every timeline where Mia called out for her in the dark was now silent. Every version of her that lived in the corners of strangers' dreams, warning them not to open the door, had been scrubbed away. The hollow hadn't devoured her. It had let her win. And in that victory, it had removed the only thing that made her real remembrance. Downstairs, the TV turned on. She didn't move. It wasn't plugged in. Of course it wasn't. The screen was blank, but a message scrolled slowly across it, one letter at a time, typed out in that deliberate, mocking rhythm that always seemed to know more than it showed. You irasidami ava. So I irasidou. The message flickered, changed. Bati stvrdie. Tjist maki updf ernt. She stood, legs trembling from dessous. The weight of being forgotten was like a pressure on her skin, a gravity that pulled her shoulders down. The room stretched longer behind her than it had any right to. She walked slowly toward the living room, every step ringing louder than it should in a house that no longer housed anything. When she reached the couch, there was someone sitting in it. Mia, but not the one she'd saved. Not the one from the mirror, or the motel, or the final door. This Mia looked up with eyes Ava didn't recognize. Not scared. Not lost. Empty. "Who are you?" the girl asked. Ava opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She tried again. Her voice, when it returned, was dust. She paused, confused. "I used to be someone who..." But the sentence slipped away from her like soap in water. She couldn't remember the ending. The Mia thing tilted its head. "You were the story. I was," Ava whispered. "But now I'm not." The girl nodded solemnly. "Then what are you now?" Ava sank to her knees. "I think I'm what gets left behind." For a long moment, there was only the hum of the TV behind her, and the weight of the question hanging between them. Ava expected it to end there. Another room, another ghost, another version of her walking deeper into a maze of forgotten rooms. But then, the girl blinked, slowly, and whispered, "I remember you." Ava froze. "What?" The girl put a hand to her chest. "Not with my brain. In here," she pointed. And Ava felt something shift, like a door cracking open in the back of her mind. It wasn't much, just a whisper, a moment, a tug. But it was something. Someone remembered. And suddenly the idea of being erased no longer held. Because if even one memory survived, one thread, then she could find her way back. Not to the myth, but to herself. She stood. The lights in the house buzzed on one by one, not violently, but urgently, like the house was waking up too. Not the hollow, not the echo of it. Something else. The rewritten story had left a gap, and Ava now existed between versions. Not hollow. Not legend. Not hero. Something new. The girl stood beside her. "I don't think you're forgotten anymore." "Why?" The girl reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled flyer. Not printed, not typed, not burned. It was Ava's handwriting, and it read, "I survived the ending." Below it, only one rule: if you find this, tell someone my name. Ava smiled. Tired, hollowed, but smiling. Because stories, once started, have a habit of finding their way home. And maybe this one wasn't over after all. The flyer didn't shake in the girl's hand, though Ava half expected it to. The air in the Birchfield house no longer hummed with threat, but something beneath the silence pulsed, like the final echo of a scream that had circled the globe and returned home quieter. Ava held the paper delicately, not because it was fragile, but because she was. Her name on the page looked too clean, untouched, as if someone else had written it in her stead. But she knew the loops of the handwriting, the tilt of the letters. It was hers. It had to be. "Where did you get this?" Ava asked. The girl didn't answer immediately. She looked out the window, where the night had thickened, and the streets outside had fallen still in that eerie way Ava knew too well. Not the stillness of sleep, but the waiting kind. The kind where nothing dares move because something else is already doing the moving. "I didn't find it," the girl finally said. "It was in my pocket when I woke up this morning, folded like it had been there a long time." Ava didn't question it. She couldn't afford to anymore. The hollow had collapsed under the weight of a rewritten myth, but stories never stay dead. They congeal in the cracks. They pick themselves up in the places no one looks. Ava had forced the narrative off the rails, and now it was crawling back. Not as a monster, not as a house, not even as a shadow. This time it was becoming something smaller, something quieter. "Have you told anyone?" Ava asked. The girl hesitated. "No, I didn't think anyone would believe me. I thought it was just a game." That word made Ava flinch, because games had rules. Games invited people in, and the hollow had always been better when it worked like a game. That's what made the flyers so dangerous. They felt like scavenger hunts, like puzzles. They told you what not to do, daring you to try anyway. Ava had thought she destroyed the rules, but in doing so, she may have left a void where something new could slither in. She moved toward the front door. It was unlocked now, wide open like it had never been a threat. "Where are you going?" the girl asked. "To see how far this has already spread." The street outside was still empty, but not quiet. Somewhere beneath the silence, Ava could hear the faint shuffle of paper against pavement. The wind carried fragments of flyers, torn pieces, scattered like dandelion fluff. She picked one up. This one didn't bear her name. It was blank except for one sentence scrawled across the center. "Tell the story forward, or she'll pull it back." She clenched her jaw. The hollow had evolved. It wasn't trying to possess space anymore. It was trying to possess momentum. The myth didn't want to be remembered for what it was. It wanted to keep moving, to stay relevant, to adapt. Ava had broken its cycle by refusing to play by the same rules. But now, the myth was mutating again, learning from its bruises, finding new forms. She walked block after block. Each lamppost had a new flyer. Some looked like hers. Some didn't. Some were drawings, others riddles, some were entirely in code. But every single one had a variation of that same theme: keep the story going. Don't stop. Don't forget. In one yard, a group of teenagers gathered around a small fire pit. One of them was reading from a flyer like a bedtime story. Ava stopped at the edge of the lawn. "Where did you get that?" she called. The boy looked up, startled. "It was in my mailbox. Everyone got one this week. It's for the Open Door Project. Supposed to be some kind of urban storytelling thing. You can win money if your version's the best." Ava felt it settle cold into her bones. A contest. A game. The myth had gone viral. Now, people weren't just repeating it, they were rewriting it, publishing new versions, filming them, sharing them, dressing up as it for Halloween, competing for followers, likes, shares, feeding it. She staggered back onto the sidewalk, breath catching. because this wasn't just a comeback. It was a full resurrection dressed as entertainment. The Hollow didn't need fear anymore. It had discovered something far more dangerous: attention. And Ava, poor, stupid, relentless Ava, had given it the best foundation it could have asked for. Her name, her warnings, her tragic little flyers. She had tried to bury it by becoming a myth. Now it was turning her into merchandise. She sprinted back to the house, flyer clutched tight in her hand. The girl met her on the porch, eyes wide. "You felt it too," she whispered. Ava nodded. "It's not over. It's just smarter now." The girl didn't blink. "Then what do we do?" Ava looked at the flyer, at the blank spaces waiting to be filled. "We write again. But this time, we don't tell them what not to do." She pulled out her pen, clicked it once, and hovered it over the paper. "We tell them why it stopped. We tell them why it's better left alone. We tell them that every version they share opens a little more of the door that should have stayed locked. And if they don't listen?" the girl asked. Ava's eyes were cold now. "Then we show them what happens when the story starts reading them back." The pen touched paper, and the myth, once again, took a breath. Ava's pen scratched the paper like it was cutting through flesh instead of pulp. She didn't bother with margins or structure. The page didn't need polish. It needed urgency. Raw truth disguised as fiction, or fiction disguised as truth. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was intention. She had learned that was the crack in the Hollow's armor. Belief made the door open. But intention, that was what made the door choose you. She wrote, "This story ends when you stop needing it to be true." Outside, the world was unraveling in reverse. It wasn't coming apart with explosions or sirens or the classic signs of doom. It was getting louder in subtler ways. People filming TikToks outside fake red doors. Kids playing knock games with whispered rules passed between classrooms. Podcasts dissecting the Birchfield origin as if it were urban folklore. Ava watched her name crawl back onto lips and screens, but always slightly wrong, misquoted, misprinted, rewritten. The Hollow was no longer hiding behind dread. It was basking in relevance, and relevance meant survival. Back inside the Birchfield house, the girl sat cross-legged on the floor, watching Ava with quiet intensity. She didn't speak. She hadn't spoken since Ava began writing again. Something in her had shifted, like she was being rewritten too, line by line, from the inside out. Ava wondered if the Hollow had marked her, or if she had marked the Hollow in some unspoken way. It didn't matter. They were connected now, like a scar that knew its mirror. The house had started to warp again, subtly. At first, Ava thought it was just exhaustion. But then she noticed the shadows, hanging a second longer than they should. The corners of the rooms folding in ways that suggested more depth than geometry should allow. The lights didn't flicker. They just leaned, like they were listening. She finished the first draft of the new flyer and pinned it to the wall with a piece of broken thread. The thread hissed when she touched it, but she forced it through the paper anyway. A statement, a challenge, a promise. Mia, or the girl who might have once been her, stood slowly and crossed the room. "You're going to tell them not to play," she said. Ava nodded. "Not with rules, not with threats, just with the ending." "But they won't believe it," the girl said, voice low. "Not unless they see it." Ava looked at her. "Then we show them." They didn't go to town this time. They went online. Ava posted the flyer as a PDF, plain font. No imagery, no creepy design. Just text. She posted it with no caption, no hashtags, no engagement bait. She dropped it in the void and walked away. And then, one by one, she watched people fill in the blanks. Some took it as a prompt, turned it into fan fiction. Some thought it was a new ARG, an alternate reality game teasing some horror release. Some tried to crack it like a code. And with every new iteration, Ava felt the Hollow flinch. Because it wasn't being believed anymore. It was being used. And monsters die when they stop being feared and start being content. But the hollow wasn't done. That night, as Ava slept with the pen clutched in her palm, the room shifted. The walls didn't move, but her dreams did. She found herself standing in the middle of a town she didn't recognize, rows of houses all with red doors. No trees, no sky, no end. In every window, a version of her watched, some smiling, some crying, some mouthing words she couldn't hear. One stepped outside. She was bleeding from the eyes but laughing, holding a mirror like a trophy. She said, "You stopped believing in endings." Ava didn't answer. The copy tilted her head. You gave the story a pause, not a full stop. Then the entire row of houses inhaled. A soundless vacuum, a ripple through dream space, and Iva woke up choking. The house was dark, the girl was gone. On the floor another flyer, not hers, typed. Clean. No mistakes. And it read, "Let her finish what she started." Ava didn't run. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She burned the flyer in the kitchen sink. But as the paper blackened and curled, the smoke spelled something she couldn't ignore. Her name. Not once. Not repeated. Just once. Just enough. The hollow hadn't given up. It had adapted again. It didn't want believers anymore. It wanted co-authors. It wanted people to finish the myth with it. And Ava knew then. The door would open again. Not in the basement. Not in a house. But in them. The ones rewriting the legend. The ones hungry for likes and horror and a taste of the dark. She couldn't stop the spread. But maybe, just maybe, she could stop the ending. Or write it first. The red doors were everywhere now. Not physically, but digitally. Ava woke to see her inbox flooded with links. Videos, forum posts, screenshots of group chats filled with theories, and interpretations of the lost flyer that had resurfaced online. Someone had traced it back to a half-corrupted PDF from a server that didn't exist anymore. Another had turned it into a thread with hand-drawn diagrams showing how each rule connected to some shadowy government cover-up. There were even music videos. People were making content from her fear, from her. Ava didn't remember uploading that flyer. She remembered writing it. Yes, she remembered the pressure in her wrist and the numbness in her fingers as she scratched those final lines like they were a confession. But she didn't remember sharing it. Didn't remember wanting it read. And yet, here it was, blown up and dissected and reenacted on phones held in trembling hands. The myth had become a virus. Not one that killed, but one that replicated. It didn't care if the story was told right. It only cared that it was told. She stared at one video in particular. Someone reading her exact words into a mirror, voice steady, face lit by candlelight. At first, nothing happened. Then the screen distorted slightly. A figure flickered behind the person, then vanished. Just a flash. Less than a second. Enough to keep viewers commenting. Did anyone else see that? Rewatch at 3:11, something moves. I tried it and my mirror cracked. Deadus. There were thousands of these now, challenges. Hashtags, dares. Kids daring other kids to read the flyer in cemeteries or abandoned buildings or public restrooms with the lights off. Some genuinely scared. Others laughing as they reenacted Ava's warnings with mock seriousness. But all of them doing exactly what she feared most, feeding it. Ava shut the laptop. Not because she couldn't handle the attention, but because it wasn't hers anymore. They had taken her voice and turned it into a trend. She stood slowly, the air in the Birchfield house unnaturally still. There were no more creaking floorboards, no flickering lights, no pull in the mirrors. It had all moved outside now, into the noise, into the scroll, into the collective mouth of a world that had no idea what it was repeating. In the hallway, she found another flyer tacked to the wall. This one was different. It was a copy of a copy. Degraded font, uneven margins, the ink slightly smudged. But the message was clear. Say her name into glass and wait. If she hears you, she'll write you back. Ava didn't write that. But she'd said something like it once. In a moment of panic, years ago. To Mia. And somehow the story had absorbed it, chewed it, and regurgitated it for the crowd. It didn't need her to write anymore. It could remember her. And worse, it could mimic her. The door hadn't stayed closed. It had multiplied. One in every mirror now, one in every whisper, one in every post tagged with her name or her myth. Not literal doors, but invitations. And the hollow didn't need to be inside a house. It could live in a trend, in attention, in curiosity. She opened the bathroom door and stared at herself in the mirror. Not because she wanted to, but because she needed to know if she was still in there. Her reflection blinked a half-second too late. It smiled. She did not. Ava stepped back, breath caught in her throat. The mirror didn't copy the motion. It stayed still. She reached for the light switch, flipped it off, back on. The reflection stayed frozen. And then, slowly, it lifted a hand and placed it against the glass. Ava didn't move. She couldn't. Her breath fogged the air between them. The reflection mouthed a sentence she couldn't hear, so it mouthed it again. Ava read the lips. You gave me a name. Let me give you yours. The lights went out. For 3 full seconds, she stood in blackness. When they flicked back on, the mirror was empty. No reflection. Just her face, her actual face, staring into nothing. And in that absence, she felt it. The hollow hadn't just infected belief. It had absorbed her identity. It was now capable of impersonating her completely. Words, movements, tone. Even her silence. And it was out there now. Writing, speaking, recruiting. Mia returned that night, not from outside, but from nowhere. One moment the room was empty, and the next, she stood in the corner, dripping wet as if she'd just been pulled from a lake. I saw it, she whispered. The next version. Iva crossed the room. What did you see? They're writing a screenplay, Mia said, shaking. A horror short. A found footage project. They're saying it's inspired by real events. They used your name, Ava. Your voice. Ava felt something crack under her ribs. A myth couldn't die when people wanted to become it. The hollow didn't need to feed on fear anymore. It had learned the power of participation. She looked out the window. Across the street, someone was filming with their phone, walking slowly toward a painted red door on a shed. Laughing. Calling out her name. It wasn't real. But it didn't matter. Belief didn't need truth. It needed repetition. She turned to Mia. We have to hijack it. What do you mean? We rewrite the story again, but louder, sharper. We bury the hollow's version under something that sounds more real than anything it can fake. Mia frowned. Won't that just feed it more? Iva smiled. Bitter. Not if we make the story boring. Because the one thing the hollow couldn't survive was disinterest. So she sat back at the table, opened her notebook, and wrote the most mundane story she could imagine. Ava Monroe goes to the grocery store. Ava Monroe gets stuck in traffic. Ava Monroe lives, and nothing happens. And for every myth born of her name, she would bury it under a pile of banal truth. Because sometimes, to kill a legend, you smother it with normal. The first story she posted was so plain it hurt to write. Ava described a Thursday, overcast, boring, filled with errands. She went to the post office. She waited in line. She forgot her wallet and had to drive back home to get it. That was the story. No whispers, no flickering lights, no mirrors that blinked out of rhythm, just silence, paper, and weather. She uploaded it under her name. No hashtags, no twist ending, no false hooks, and the internet didn't know what to do with it. A few people thought it was ironic. Some said it was a new kind of horror, the dread of everyday life. But most scrolled past without sharing. Exactly what she wanted. It was, at last, unremarkable. For once, her name didn't summon shadows. It triggered apathy. It was a start. She wrote more, one each day. Stories with no arc, no climax. Ava Monroe goes to a laundromat. Ava Monroe makes soup and forgets the salt. Ava Monroe's cat throws up on the rug, and she doesn't clean it for 3 hours. They were painful in their smallness, suffocating in how hard they tried not to be memorable. And for a while it seemed to work. Fewer reposts, fewer comments. The red doors in TikToks lost traction. The viral clips got buried under new trends. The Hollow was starving, but then something new happened. Someone started remixing her mundane posts. They stitched on endings that weren't hers. Ava Monroe goes to the post office and never comes back. Ava Monroe makes soup, but one spoonful turns her teeth black. Ava Monroe sees her reflection blink at the wrong moment and smiles back. At first, it was one user, then dozens, then thousands. The myth had learned irony. It had adapted again, twisting even her resistance into material. Now the comments weren't scared, they were entertained. The horror was back, but it was dressed in jokes. Day 13 of trying to summon Ava Monroe with Campbell's soup, one user joked. Spoon held dramatically over their mouth. Another filmed themselves walking backwards down a hallway, chanting the rules Ava had destroyed, but smiling while they did it. It was performance now. A game that didn't even know it was feeding something real. Ava slammed her laptop shut. There was no fighting it directly, no writing her way out. Every word she wrote was stolen, digested, made viral. The Hollow was no longer an entity. It was an ecosystem. And even worse, it was fun. Maya sat on the stairs, biting at the skin on her thumb. They're giving it a face, she said. A real one. Ava looked up, tired. What do you mean? Mia pulled out her phone, showed her a new video. Someone had created a short film, just 4 minutes long. A shadowy figure, red eyes, stitched mouth. It walked through a house that wasn't quite Birchfield, but wasn't far off. The voiceover was chillingly familiar. They'd recreated her voice, pulled it from old interviews, clipped and pasted it until it sounded like she was inviting them in. And the creature in the video, it was called Ava. Not the Hollow, not the thread. Her? They'd made her the monster. Do you understand now? Mia said, voice hollow. They don't need the rules anymore. They have a face, a villain. Ava wanted to scream, not because she was afraid, but because she was done being rearranged by strangers. They had taken her name, her warnings, her survival, and turned it into costume and caricature. She was now both victim and threat, saint and demon. Depending on the version being told, she wasn't real anymore. She was content. She stood abruptly, knocking the chair over behind her. No more flyers, she said. Mia stood too. Then what? No more rules. No more warnings. No more pretending the story still belongs to me. Then what do we do? Mia repeated. We erase it for real. Not by lying. Not by fighting it. But by giving them nothing. Not silence. Truth. Something so flat and clean and bright, it can't be twisted. Mia hesitated. You think they'll listen? Ava smiled bitterly. They won't. But I'm not writing for them anymore. That night, Ava wrote the final post. A plain, untagged note on a blog that no one followed. She titled it, This Is Not a Legend. And in it, she explained everything. No red doors. No rules. No monster. Just a scared girl who made up a flyer once to warn her sister. And how it got out of control. She told them she was never in danger. That nothing ever followed her. That she made it all up. That her name wasn't Ava Monroe. That she didn't even exist. And then she deleted the blog. Deleted the account. Deleted everything. And went to sleep with nothing written under her name for the first time in years. Outside, the wind didn't howl. The mirror didn't flicker. No flyers under the door. But still a feeling. A tension. Because myths don't die, they hibernate. And she knew the Hollow was quiet for now. Waiting for the next storyteller. The next game. The next clever lie that sounded too much like truth. But for now, Ava had taken its name. Buried it under a mountain of ordinary. And sometimes, she thought, that's all you can do with monsters. Make them boring enough to be forgotten. The days that followed felt empty in the way a house feels after a party ends. Quiet, but stained with memory. Ava didn't write. She didn't search her name. She didn't chase rumors or check for new videos or monitor the flickering edge of a trend. She simply let it all pass. And at first, it was unbearable. She'd spent so long wrapped in tension, sharpened by the threat of being seen, chased, believed into a shape she never asked to become. Now the absence of that pressure felt like walking through fog with no landmarks. Peace was strange, almost unnatural. But the world didn't end. The mirror in the bathroom stopped lagging. The thread in the attic remained still. The creaking boards stopped whispering her name in the middle of the night. The house became a house again. Birchfield returned to silence. Ava slept for 17 hours straight. When she woke, the sun was rising, not red, not dramatic, just warm. She made tea, sat on the porch. The girl, Mia, sat beside her, legs tucked under her, silent. They didn't talk for a long time. They didn't need to. Both of them knew what had happened, even if neither could say precisely when the tipping point came. Ava had starved the hollow not by waging war, but by stepping out of the light, by refusing to let the myth twist her anymore. She had smothered it with dullness, drowned it under plain truth. The internet had already moved on. A new viral story had taken its place. A faceless man in a tunnel, a cursed email chain, a secret level in an old game. Myths recycled and repackaged, always eager for the next vessel. And Ava wasn't angry about it anymore. There was a kind of mercy in knowing she'd been replaced. Forgotten. It meant the pressure was off her shoulders. But that didn't mean the danger was gone. One afternoon, she walked through town and noticed a boy sitting on the curb, drawing in chalk. She paused, her breath catching. He was sketching a door. Red. No handle. Perfectly square. She crouched beside him, voice calm. "Where'd you see that, sweetie?" The boy didn't look up. "It's from a story." "Who told it to you?" He shrugged. "It was in a game." She nodded slowly. "Do you know what happens if someone opens it?" He drew a tiny stick figure standing at the door. "They disappear," he said, very softly. Ava stood. Her legs were trembling, even after everything. It was still there. Not because of her. Not even because of the flyers. But because the idea had become portable. It could survive anywhere. In a child's game. In a whisper. In art. The hollow didn't need to be a force anymore. It just needed to be remembered. She walked home slower than usual. Not afraid, not anymore, but wary, sad. Like watching something you tried to bury grow roots in the concrete anyway. Maya was waiting for her. "They're talking again," she said without preamble. "Online, a new thread, a new variation, the Ava Monroe challenge. But it's not about you this time. They don't even use your name. Just the rules." Ava sat at the table. Her hand moved without thinking. She wrote, "Don't look behind the third mirror. Always count the stairs. If the thread moves, pretend not to notice." She stared at the words. They didn't feel dangerous anymore. They felt pathetic. Like trying too hard to be scary. Like a dying echo repeating itself in an empty theater. She scratched a line through each one. "You know what the real rules are," she said. Mia looked up. Ava wrote 3 more lines. "Most doors don't lead anywhere. Most mirrors reflect exactly what you are. Most monsters are just lonely things pretending to be remembered." They left it at that. A final truth. Not a warning. Not a myth. Just a soft conclusion. That night, Ava dreamed of a field. No doors. No mirrors. No thread. Just tall grass and a long sky. She stood alone, but she wasn't afraid. In the distance, something watched her. It didn't move closer. It didn't smile. It simply sat there, as if waiting for her to decide if it was real or not. She turned away, and woke up lighter. Somewhere, the hollow still existed, but now it was just a rumor among many, and Ava Monroe. She was just a woman who once told a story that people made too big. Now, finally, she was done telling it. Ava no longer flinched at creaks in the floorboards or shadows that lingered too long. After everything, after the myths and mirrors and names whispered into glass, she had come to accept that not every strange thing in the world needed to be hunted down or explained. Some things were just persistent, like background noise, like grief, like the way a melody gets stuck in your head long after you've forgotten where you heard it. The hollow, whatever it was now, had become one of those things, not a monster, Not a place, not even a presence. Just a leftover. An echo with teeth dulled by time. She spent her mornings sweeping the porch and her evenings walking quiet streets. Her name didn't come up on the internet anymore. The latest viral urban myth had replaced her, as they all did eventually. A haunted voicemail. A cursed book that erased pages from memory. Nothing stuck forever, not even fear. But every so often, a piece of the past found its way back. Like the time she caught a flyer caught in the wind. Blank, except for a hand, drawn eye in the corner. Or the voicemail left on her phone with only static and, faintly, her own voice muttering something she didn't remember saying. Those were reminders, not of danger, but of what once was. Of how close she came to being a cautionary tale that never got her ending. And then, one day, she got a letter. Not an email, not a post. A real letter, folded neatly, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, lined and faded. Typed words. Simple. I read your final post. I understand now. But she's still here. Not as you. As me. What do I do? No name. Just that. Ava read it twice. 3 times. Folded it. Tucked it into a drawer without answering. She didn't know what to say. Because the truth was, she'd killed her version of the story. But someone else had picked up the thread. Maybe not the hollow exactly. Maybe not the same game. But something close enough that it had teeth again. The legend had outlived her. Of course it had. It always would. That was the part no one understood about stories. Once they leave your hands, they're no longer yours. You can't kill them. Not really. You can only decide how much of yourself you're willing to lose trying to put them down. Ava wasn't willing to lose any more, but that didn't mean she was blind. She started keeping a notebook again. Not filled with rules. Not warnings. Just observations. A neighbor who stared too long into a dry fish tank. A girl at the store who called herself Ava with a grin too wide to be real. A new flyer stapled to a telephone pole that read, "She's looking through your eyes." Don't blink. None of it surprised her. All of it she wrote down. She never shared the notebook. Never posted another story. But she didn't destroy it either. Because maybe, one day, someone else would come looking. Someone scared, unsure, halfway between belief and madness. And if that person found her, really found her, then maybe she'd hand them the book, not to scare them, but to say, "I survived. You can too. Just don't feed it, because that's all it ever wanted. Attention." Ava had learned, the most dangerous myth isn't the one that hunts you. It's the one you chase, trying to be part of something bigger than yourself. She stopped chasing a long time ago. Now, she lived, simple, quiet, no mirrors covered, no thread watched, but always listening, always ready, because sometimes legends knock twice, and when they do, Ava Monroe will decide whether or not to answer. Ava had learned to listen not just with her ears, but with her skin, with the way the air felt around her, the subtle change in weight when a room wasn't quite empty, the way her breath sometimes fogged even when the air was warm. For a while, those sensations had faded, dulled like old scars that no longer itched. But lately, she'd felt the tension again. Not the sharp terror of the early days, but a creeping awareness, like something tugging faintly at the back of her mind. A thought that hadn't formed yet, but wouldn't go away. It started with footsteps. She heard them behind her on a walk. Light, deliberate, always at a distance. When she turned, there was no one. Not once. But the pattern continued. 3 steps, pause, 3 more. Like someone who didn't want to catch up, only follow. She didn't panic. Panic was useless now. She simply made note of it. In her notebook, in her head. And when she got home, she sat by the window and waited. She half expected a flyer to slide under the door, a shadow to stretch longer than it should. But there was nothing. The next morning, she found her front door unlocked. She never forgot to lock it. On the floor inside the threshold, perfectly centered, was a key, old, iron, ornate. It didn't fit any of the locks in her house. She held it, weighed it in her palm, then set it down on the table like it might bite. It didn't. But the house felt different after that. Heavier. Like it remembered things she didn't. The girl, Mia, hadn't been by in days. Ava didn't blame her. They had both tried to put the legend to rest, and for a time, it worked. But legends don't stay buried. They seep through cracks, find new faces to wear, whisper themselves into gaps left behind. That night, Ava dreamed of the thread again. Except it wasn't thread, it was hair. Long, black, and coiled like rope, crawling under the floorboards. She followed it in the dream, step by step, to a closet that hadn't existed before. Inside mirrors. Dozens of them. None reflected her. Only a hallway behind her, one that didn't exist in real life. She reached out to touch one and saw her reflection finally appear. But it wasn't her face. It was a girl, younger, pale, mouth stitched shut, eyes pleading. Ava jerked awake, breath shallow, pulse hammering. There was a mirror across the room that hadn't been there the night before, and on the glass, written in her own handwriting, Lao Yu Slos The Omlong Dawar. She stared at it for a long time, tried to breathe. Tried to convince herself this was just an echo, one of the last flares of a story dying off. But deep down, she knew better. She hadn't killed the hollow. She'd only cornered it, forced it to change. And now, it was finding a way to open back up, not with rules or flyers or even fear, with guilt. The story had stopped being about curiosity. It had become about consequence. Ava had tried to kill it by denying it attention, but now it was using her own past to slip through again. The followers, the imitators, the people who picked up the old flyers and rewrote them. Each of them had opened a different door, and some of them didn't know how to close it. The next day, Mia returned. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. "I went into the old theater downtown," she said, "just to look, just to see if the stories had started again." Ava felt her stomach sink. "What did you see?" "Not what? Who?" Mia whispered. She was sitting in the front row, wearing my face, holding the thread. Ava closed her eyes. So that's what it had become now, a mimic. No more abstract fear, no more rules on paper. It had moved into people's faces, memories. It had gone intimate. Mia continued. She smiled at me, didn't speak. But I heard something, not out loud, in my head. What did it say? Maya's voice cracked. It said, "She stopped writing." So I wrote myself in. Ava didn't reply. She stood, walked to the mirror, and wiped the message off the glass. The key still sat on the table. She picked it up. It was cold. Not metaphorical cold, bone deep, like it had been waiting to be touched. She turned it over in her hand and noticed something engraved on the teeth. Tiny, shallow letters. Ayushiorad By Shiar. Ava's breath hitched. The story hadn't just outlived her. It had claimed her as creator. Now it didn't need her voice. It had her signature. And somewhere out there, people were writing new chapters with her name etched into the spine, feeding the hollow without even knowing it. She looked at Mia. "I think it's starting over." "No," Mia said. "It's adapting." Ava walked to the closet. Not to hide, to wait. Because if it had started writing itself, then she needed to be the editor. She wasn't going to run anymore. Not from mirrors. Not from thread. Not even from the stories they told in her name. She would let it speak. Then she would speak back. And maybe, just maybe, she'd write the real ending. One no one would dare rewrite. Ava sat at the kitchen table for hours, the key between her fingers like a shard of something ancient. Something not meant to be held. She stared at the words engraved on it, Ayu Alchorad Byhar, and felt them burrow under her skin, not just as a label, but a curse. It wasn't about ownership anymore. It was about authorship. The hollow hadn't just fed on the stories. It had begun to credit them. To sign them with her name like a twisted publisher printing fables through borrowed mouths. Outside, the wind scratched at the windows like it wanted in, but she knew better. The danger wasn't out there anymore. It was in circulation. In the edits. In the rewrites. The hollow had evolved into something parasitic, not on the body but on narrative. And it had learned the power of unfinished business. Mia stayed quiet, curled on the couch like a child pretending not to exist. Her voice was barely audible when she finally spoke. What happens if someone else believes they wrote it? Ava turned. What do you mean? Maya sat up slowly. What if it picks someone new? Someone who wants the story. Someone hungry enough to wear it. Ava didn't want to answer, because the answer was already clawing its way up her spine. The story was hungry for a new vessel. Not a house, not a door, not even a myth. A person. Someone eager for recognition. For control. Someone willing to play God for just a page or two. The key hadn't come to lock a door. It had come to hand one over. Somewhere, someone had started writing again, and they'd signed Ava's name at the bottom. She stood abruptly and walked to her desk. The old one? The one she hadn't touched in months. The drawer she never opened anymore stuck, as if it had been glued shut, but with enough pressure it groaned loose. Inside, her old notes. Crumpled flyers. Unpublished pages. One line stood out, scribbled in thick black ink across a yellowing sheet. If the story repeats, it's because it wasn't finished right the first time. Her own handwriting. She didn't remember writing it. Maybe she never had. Or maybe the hollow had found a way to plant words now, subtle and sly. Maybe it had figured out how to speak in a voice so close to hers it blurred the edge between thought and possession. She knew what she had to do. Write again. Not to tell the story, not to fight it, but to end it, for real. And this time, not through fear, or mystery, or reverse psychology. No riddles. No cursed instructions. No mirrors. Just truth. She pulled out a fresh notebook, untouched, clean as snowfall. She didn't write a title. Titles gave the myth something to latch onto. She didn't format it like a story. That would make it readable, spreadable. She wrote it as a confession. There is no hollow. There never was. I lied because I was scared. I made it up because I needed people to look at me. The rules, the doors, the mirrors, they were metaphors. Stories I stole from places I don't remember. Places that felt wrong but never were, and you believed it. You made it real. You gave it a body, and now it's yours, not mine. I take none of it with me. Each sentence she wrote felt like snapping a thread. She could almost hear it. The fraying of a myth, undone stitch by stitch. She wrote until her hand ached, until her name meant nothing again. And when she finished, she folded the pages neatly. No signature, no embellishment. She slid them under the mirror in the hallway, the first one that had ever blinked. She whispered, "You can't use me anymore," and turned her back. But as she stepped away, the lights flickered once, just once, and a faint tapping echoed from inside the glass, not like fingers, like typing. Behind the mirror, something had a keyboard. Something was still writing. Ava froze. Because this wasn't about ending her story anymore. It was about ending the pattern. The hollow didn't just feed on what she gave it. It fed on anyone who tried to own the story. Anyone who believed it could be shaped, edited, published. She turned back and stared into the mirror. The reflection was normal, almost. Except for a shadow behind her that didn't belong to anything in the room. She didn't turn to look. Instead, she said aloud, "You don't get to narrate me." The light stayed steady. The mirror held still. And in that silence, Ava felt something give way. Not break, not explode. Just relent. The story was no longer fighting her, because it had found someone new. The question now wasn't whether the hollow would return. It was who would invite it next. Ava stepped away from the desk. The notebook stayed behind. And somewhere, far away, someone picked up a pen they didn't remember buying and started to write. It ended the same way it began, not with screaming or blood, not with cursed objects or flickering lights, but with a story that felt too real to be fiction. Ava didn't know who the new writer was. She didn't need to. That was the cruel genius of the hollow. It didn't need permission anymore. Just curiosity. just a blank page, and someone foolish enough to think they could control the ending. And now, somewhere, someone had picked up that page like it was a gift. They hadn't written a horror story. Not yet. They were probably writing something innocent, something clever, a story that just happened to include a red door. Just happened to describe a thread. Just happened to use her name. But Ava felt the shift when it happened. It was subtle, like hearing your own voice echo through a phone line seconds after you've stopped talking. A delay in the world. A shadow that moved before you did. The hollow had detached from her at last, but not because it had been defeated. It had evolved again. It no longer needed a face. It only needed fingerprints. And Ava, she was done trying to clean hers off. She spent her final days in the Birchfield house packing up the silence. Not the furniture, not the books, just the stillness. The way the air had returned to its old self. The way mirrors reflected properly now, without second thoughts. The way she could walk up the stairs without counting each one. It wasn't closure. It was peace. And peace didn't come from winning. It came from walking away before the war rewrote you into a warning. Mia had already left. She said she needed to see something different. Landscapes without stories, buildings without history, faces that didn't remind her of herself. Ava didn't blame her. There was no point in staying once the house had gone hollow for real. Once it was nothing but drywall and shadows that finally obeyed the laws of physics. Before she left, Ava walked one last time to the mirror in the hallway, the first one that had shown her a lie. She looked at herself and saw only herself. No blink out of sync, no reflection smirking behind her eyes, just an aging woman who had lived through something no one would ever understand fully. She touched the glass gently, not with fear, but with recognition. The mirror didn't ripple, didn't hum, didn't watch. "Thank you," she whispered, not to the hollow, but to the silence that had come afterward, to the quiet, to the ending that held. She turned, left the mirror behind, and locked the front door. The red paint on it had long since faded. Now it was just a door. And when she stepped onto the porch, she didn't feel followed. No footsteps in the grass, no cold breath at her neck, just wind, real wind. She drove for hours that day, past towns that didn't know her name, past billboards advertising ghost tours and haunted podcasts and ARGs dressed up as revelations. She kept the radio off. The quiet was kinder. And when she finally stopped, it wasn't at another myth. It was a motel off the highway. Cheap, unremarkable, beautiful in its nothingness. No history, no story, just a bed and a lamp and curtains that stayed shut. She slept for 3 nights straight, and when she woke up the final morning, she knew it was over. At least for her. Somewhere else. Someone was starting again, writing their version, painting their door, telling themselves they were in control. They weren't. But they'd learn. Because that's how the hollow survives. Not by screaming into mirrors or dragging people into closets, but by waiting until someone tells a story with too much belief, too much hunger. Someone who thinks they can perfect it, who thinks they've found a better ending. Ava didn't need to warn them. She didn't need to watch. Because she had finally done the one thing no one else could. She had closed the book and not looked back. There were no more parts, no more flyers, no more edits, only silence. And that silence, at long last, stayed.